Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight, Thursday, February 2nd, 2023, our regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen's meeting. I call our meeting to order and ask that we please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, our next section would be our additions and changes to the agenda. What I would request is if we could move up in front of 8 would be the assessor's report, which would be 9D, and then the EDC commission, which would be, actually, do we want to try to do the EDC first and then the building committee?
I think so. I think that should go faster than the building committee. There's three different votes or possible votes on the building committee.
Okay. And then do our EDC commission, which would be 9A, and then our building committee on their items, which would be 8B. So does anybody having any issues with doing those changes? That way we can get all the guests through.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, good. Then that is what we will do for that. Our next section then would be our public comment. And this is the section of the agenda that's reserved for people in attendance who wish to briefly address the board. We request that the comments be limited to 3 minutes or less. And then people wishing to make comments should type comment and their name in the chat box, and then they will be recognized.
Our first public comment this evening is from Kevin Tulamiri.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and members of the Board of Selectmen. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Sorry about the feedback. Okay, I'll try to make this quick and painless. I would please encourage the members of the board to read through the historical information and look at the maps that I provided that are in your agenda tonight. There are very important historical connections to be made between the land at 17 Kinney Road and the history of Hebron. I'll let you read through those, but these are really important, and it is the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen to follow up on these and pursue the eligibility for that location for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. That was advised in the archaeological report by Dr. Sarah Holmes that was provided to the committee. So I would urge the committee to follow up on their responsibilities to take care of those issues and look at that before any further plans or phases of development go forward. I'd also like to comment, please, on a couple of the comments of the PBC, the Public Building Committee, alternative concepts that are included in tonight's agenda as well. I appreciate the efforts of the Public Building Committee, but unfortunately there are some glaring omissions and errors. Concept number 1, the old Colchester Road issue, the most significant advantage is the location has compromised groundwater. This should be a primary consideration as stated by the DEEP best management practices. It's also, another advantage is that a plan was established in 2016. And please review the letter from former town planner Michael O'Leary to the Public Building Committee dated May 10th, 2016, that was submitted to the Board of Selectmen and is included in your January 5th, 2023 agenda. It shows that there is a plan and that is a valuable option. Concept number 4, the advantages of relocating a salt shed to another location would mitigate concerns over groundwater contamination but would not address the destruction of a site with a high likelihood of listing on the National Register of Historic Places. Under concept number 5, the disadvantage is, yes, the salt shed is a main objection by abutting property owners, but not only property owners in the area, several residents from across Hebron have attended meetings and spoken to this board with valid concerns. The contamination of a tributary that leads directly into the Raymond Brook Marsh, as well as the destruction of a priceless historical site, is truly needs to be strongly considered, and concept 5 really needs to be disregarded. As you heard from Mr. William Warzika, the hydrogeologist, this will contaminate the water, and this will be well beyond our time as residents of Hebron, that you will be dealing with road salt contamination of groundwater that will lead into the Raymond Brook Marsh, our groundwater aquifer protection zone. So, and trying to place a site, a salt shed, and this sort of industrial site is in direct conflict with the DEEP best management practices that say, do not site a salt shed on GA water. It's very clear. There are feasible alternatives, as the report from the Public Building Committee clearly shows. And so please follow up on those alternatives. And under the disadvantage number 2, under concept 5, where it states that plans have been made for many years as using this site for a business or commercial expansion, ignoring these issues for decades does not make them go away. We have
Thank
new.
you, Mr. Tulamari. Your
you're up
time
to
is
5
up
minutes.
now.
Okay, thank
And
you for
next-
your time.
Next
Mr.
up
Chairman,
is,
Mr. Chairman, before we move on to the next thing, I'd like to ask Mr. Tulamari a question.
Okay, sir. We try not to do too much interact. Go ahead.
I know, but he just keeps talking, and at some point we have to respond to it. So it's just a simple question. So Mr. Tulamari, over the last meetings, it seems like your salient point and most important issue to you is the groundwater contamination. So if we did find an alternative and relocate the salt shed somewhere else, would you be supportive of the project? And trying to find other locations, when we do that and just trying to listen to people as they talk when they hear about it, might go back to over to Burnt Hill Park. They have the same concerns that you do, and they don't want it in their neighborhood either. So at some point, we have to get together and make some concessions. So if that is your most important issue, and I get it, nobody wants their groundwater contaminated, would you be supportive then?
Mr. Chairman, may I reply?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Robera. I appreciate your question and the opportunity to respond to that. The groundwater contamination is immensely important, but it's not the only important issue with this site. As you hopefully will read in the documentation that I provided, this is a significant historical site that has a high likelihood of being eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. I really hope that can sink in, because the citing of this for environmental reasons is clear, and it's not just my opinion. It states it should not be located on a site with GA groundwater. Where the Public
Okay.
Works is now is compromised groundwater. That's where it needs to be cited. But it's not the only
Okay,
issue.
all right,
Thank you.
all right. I get your response. Okay, thank you.
next
Next,
up
please.
is John Barron.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. John Barron, 33 Cone Road. Before I start, I do want to address a previous comment about a salt shed at Burnt Hill. My family has occupied Burnt Hill for over a century. And frankly, Burnt Hill Park has so thoroughly destroyed all historical evidence that there's no reason why a salt shed could not be located there as had been planned initially. Unfortunately, that was a mistake that was made, and we all need to live with that. The first part of what I want to bring to the attention of the board is from James Quinn, the Mohegan tribal historian, and he has requested that I put before the board the idea, the concept that vacant land does not mean that the land has no history, as it's referred to in the POCD. That land does have a history, and I think that's important. SHPO reports, the second part of this, are not an infallible examination of a site. As new information becomes available, the accuracy of a SHPO report diminishes. And this is a case in point specifically with Burnt Hill Park. Burnt Hill Park was the subject of 2 SHPO reports. It has more SHPO reports than any site in Hebron. Neither of the 2 SHPO reports viewed the land as historically significant, and it was bulldozed to put in the park. Projectile points from adjacent property testify that Hebron has an indigenous history beginning between 9,000 and 10,000 before the present. I want to hold up the oldest object. I don't know, can you see this?
No.
Yes,
Not
no?
really.
Okay. It's about the size of my thumb. It dates from 8,000 years before Cleopatra. Burnt Hill has now been listed with the state archaeologist as one of the few Paleo-Indian sites in Connecticut. There are only 6. It's very significant, but that evidence was removed and destroyed. What I want to bring to the board is that I worked with Sarah Holmes, providing background information for the Kinney Road SHPO report. I'm familiar with her report and her research methods. I know its strengths and its weaknesses. The archaeology is good, but even so, a Paleo Indian projectile point can easily slip through the grid of archaeological excavation. To date, there's been no comprehensive title search of 17 Kinney Road. In reference to this, Ms. Holmes clearly states on page 40, which is posted on the town website, it is recommended that additional archaeology and title research is merited for the Gilbert and Bacchus estates if future modifications are made to the existing plan. This is in specific regard to Field 1 along Kinney Road and land at the intersection of Route 85 and Kinney Road, the site where the Bacchus Tannery operated. She concludes, and I emphasize, these issues suggest future research or consideration is needed based on the land deed research, and in addition to what is known of Henry Peters' land holdings. I've done some of this additional research.
Mr.
And,
Barron, sorry,
Okay,
your
your
time
time is
is up. Please finish up.
well, I obviously can't finish up with this. I'm so sorry. I want you to be aware that the SHPO report is in grave error, and that to go with it, there is new information that should be published to the voters of Hebron so they can make an informed decision. The town has messed up
Okay.
Burnt Hill Park. This should not be an occasion to mess up something equally important. I'm sorry if
Thank
I was
you.
long-winded.
Next up is Frank Sitkus.
Frank?
Hey, good evening. I just sent in a chat comment. I was just, I'm at work right now, so I was just sending in a comment to thank Judy for her long service to the town of Hebron and all the great things that she did to make the town a better place to live. And so my comments are there. So thank you for acknowledging me. And hopefully you guys have a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now Greg Shortell.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Committee. Greg Shortell, 22 Kinney Road. I just wanted to speak up tonight and say that I fully support Kevin Tulamary and John Barron's concerns and considerations of the board regarding the historical significance of 17 Kinney Road. In addition to that, I do want to express my concern as a resident of Kinney Road to the fact that we're relying on this clean ground drinking water here, and the risk that this proposed site presents to contaminating this GA rated water source that not only Kinney Road but many of the surrounding streets around here rely on. The chance of this happening, the contamination of groundwater by this salt shed, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So I hope when these decisions are made, the long-term ramifications of this decision are being considered and thought about, because it may not be an issue for the town today in the next 5 years or in the next 10 years, but sooner or later it's going to happen and it's going to be a major problem. So I just wanted to express my concerns again around this location, and I do strongly urge the committee to consider some of the alternative options. I know the building committee has already done their research and presented their case as to why they feel they're not valid. But I think we need to continue to look to be creative with some of these alternative options. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Dave and Aaron, and if you could state your full name and address, please.
Yes, hi, thank you. My name is David Jones. My wife is Erin Jones. We live at 203 Millstream Road, Hampstead. I just wanted to follow up with the previous comments, to be honest, and say that we are in full support of exploring the historical significance of this area and this land. Based on what I've read, it is significant, and I think it needs to be, if that is indeed the case, it needs to be preserved. And there's, I think, so much that can be done with that as a form of ecotourism and historical tourism for the town of Hebron. And I think it's an opportunity that we need to explore. It's, again, like I think I said before in other meetings, once something significant like this and the land that we have goes away, once it's gone, we can't ever get it back. And the significance of this land goes back 10,000 or more years for various things. And the history that even just since the town of Hebron was founded is incredible. And I think that's something that we have to really explore, make sure we have, we've done what's really right for the communities and the future generations. And I teach history, and so this is something that's near and dear to my heart as it is. And to see something that's this close and where we are, and I think even the connections that we have with our own elementary school children in this town that live, right across the street from this would be incredible. The state of Connecticut is now partnering with the 5 tribal nations that lived on this land to incorporate Native American indigenous curriculum starting next year, both secondary and then following the year after that, or 2 years after that with elementary, in every grade level. So I think it is truly significant. So again, thank you. I think there's got to be a better solution, and I know we can work together to find that out. But I think, we're missing a huge opportunity here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Caitlin Hershey is up next.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I am here for something a little bit unrelated. So I apologize for breaking this conversation up. But I know that you guys are talking about ARPA tonight, and I just wanted to touch base quickly on something as a resident, not as a chair of anything, and talk about the money that code is asking for DE&I training, for implicit bias training. We've been hit by every bug in the country, I think, so I'm a little bit behind, and I was catching up on the River East, I think last week or the week before, and I had seen that in part of the article for ARPA 2 funds that town had requested that code reduce the original ask that was just under 8,000 to slash that pretty much in half, and I believe the final cost was closer to 5. As a resident, with the state of affairs in the country right now, and coming from a town that has serious diversity problems, I was personally a little bit taken aback that we were able to pass accreditation for a police building, but we're kind of beating up the diversity and inclusion group for training across the board for our town elected officials and staff members. So, I know that Peter had mentioned in the last meeting that doing something like this, maybe on a regular basis and not through ARPA, would be a great idea. And I really support that. I not only support that, but I support bumping that back up to $8,000. Anything that we can do to support this group and support diversity and inclusion, we should be jumping at it, and we should really be taking their word to heart, and not trying to nickel and dime over stuff like this. A lot of these companies charge between $5,000 to $10,000 for one of these trainings. The fact that they found anything for $1,200 is like a miracle. And I just really wanted to kind of voice my support to you guys and to Code for the work that they do and the work that is so needed in so many towns, not just us. But I would love to see not only that money replaced back in ARPA, but also to really start coming out of town funding every year. It should be a budget item. And I think it's super important for, the future of our town. Less than a half a mile from town hall was a noose. Like, if we are beating our diversity and inclusion people up over $4,000 when we're receiving $2.8 million from the government, like, we got to reprioritize here. So I just wanted to jump on as a resident and just say, the wind was taken out of my sails a little bit when I read that in the River East. And I would really love to see not only that number come back up to 8, but become an official budget item in the future for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Jean Tolomeri is next.
Oh, yes. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for allowing us to speak. I would like to chime in here again on the old H2O issue. And I would like to thank, Dave and Aaron and Greg. When we talk about groundwater pollution, at first we all think, oh, the Raymond Brook watershed, it just runs right down to the marsh. It's just going to go across the top. But it really doesn't. It could sink down into the fractures that affect everyone's wells. And that's like pretty serious. It's also going to be really expensive. If we have to replace the wells on the south side of Kinney Road and the west side of Millstream, so it's over a dozen wells, and you're going to have to go under like 2 or 3 stream corridors. And so how much will that cost per house to dig in town water? You're going to rip up the roads, cut through all the bedrock that's there and the boulders. We're talking some pretty serious money. So we're going to spend a lot of money to build a beautiful new facility. Now we're going to double the cost to put water to people's houses. This is something we really need to think about ahead of time. Maybe put the money aside ahead of time in case the wells do get contaminated. We can put in monitoring wells, which is great. But monitoring wells don't stop water pollution, and they don't fix the water pollution. And it's a long time between a monitoring well going off and people finding out they have contaminated water, and then waiting in line at the firehouse for water for what, years, until the wells get replaced with town water. and I know it's kind of a henny penny, maybe piglet kind of panic, but it's also a reality. Living without water in your house is a real drag. And a lot of people in Connecticut have been having to live without water in their houses because of sodium chloride in the wells. And you can't dig deeper. You have to put in town water. So let's consider that in our budget and how much it will cost to put town water into Mill Stream and Kinney Road. Remember, you're going to go under 3 stream corridors to do it. It's a little bit tricky. So thank you. And please, let's keep all that money in mind too. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Andrea Latanzi is next.
Apparently her mic is not working.
Okay, then we have Terry McManus next.
Good evening. Mr. Chair, I really appreciate what you did just a couple minutes ago. This is a very formal time and a very fraught time for friction right before an important meeting. But allowing a little bit of back and forth right just a few minutes ago with Mark's question clarified an awful lot of things. I really appreciate the leeway given at that point. And this is basically a question, a rhetorical question, not one that's up for debate. It can go anywhere. But the 2004 plan for the Village Green District outlined this area for mixed use and economic development. It was brought together from documents I've been able to read back with a vision that was really grand. It was and is beautiful. It was worked on by people like yourselves and Andy, and it was a dream to go forward. And it seemed extremely feasible at that time. And then 2008 hit. The population of the town has decreased since then. A lot of things changed. And I'm afraid, well, I don't know, actually, I'm still learning, but it seems as if this vision may have had to go behind us because the money wasn't there. The business prospects weren't there. In 2019, the town saw a possibility to basically use part of this land, the parcel that we're talking about, for a public works facility, a much needed public works facility. And at this point, so I'm sorry, I got distracted. At this point, the town decided, there was a vote taken. There was a proposal put forward, the town went along with it, the voters of the town. And thus these plans that Andy's brought forth has come from that point in time. Now we have a dilemma, and I think it's coming from a lot of sources, and I think part of it is COVID related, the retrenchment that happened from COVID. And everything that I'm seeing at this point, and this is just for input and not just for the Board of Selectmen, but for all the town people that are speaking at these in opposition, in for. My first impression of living in Hebron, I became friends, my first friend was right across the street. And after about a year and a half, he came across the street, we sat down, had a beer, and he told me that he was moving. And the reason he was moving is because he couldn't afford his taxes. He built that house and he had to move out of it. He was in the 70s. He was what we might call elderly, which I think I'm approaching. But that was my first impression. We haven't seen the business growth that the 2004 plan envisioned. We are seeing pushback on a public facility that's already been decided, the use of the land's already been decided by the community. COVID has hit. We don't know what the economic repercussions of that are going to be. And I just want everyone to think, including the residents, how can we go forward as a town? We need area for business growth. We need a public works facility. We need clean water. We don't need fighting against each other. So I really appreciate all your work, and I wish you good luck as we go forward. I wish the residents of Kinney Road good luck as we go forward. But stalemate isn't going to help this town at all. We need to build a vision. We need to keep going with it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other?
I think that's it for now, Chairman Larson.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Item 5 would be our good to know special recognition. Andy?
Nope, that's open for tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you. Number 6, our appointments and resignations.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Donna so graciously put those up on the board. If you want to read those, or I can. Since
Yeah,
you're-
no, we have a letter from Judy Padell resigning her position on the Economic Development Commission. I'll read the proposed motion and open it up for discussion. Move that the Hebron Board of Selectmen accept the resignation of Judy Padell from the Economic Development Commission with regret and thanks for her years of service. I don't know if any of my other board members want to go first.
I'll go first, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
You know, it's interesting because Judy and I are almost, parallel across the street from where we live in Gilead. And she has been a gracious neighbor. She's opened up her home for many, amazing events. She's really a pillar of volunteerism in this community. She organized the town center project and pulled that together from its very inception, from when it was just a few people to now it's expanded into this wonderful, joyous thing for the town. So, I would accept her resignation with regret, but I think we would all deeply appreciate the number of years she has given to this community. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? I'm going to go. I've known Judy. I knew her husband, David. I knew him back from the fire department. David, her husband, actually did a lot of building projects within the fire department, making different cabinetry and all for TVs and audio visual equipment and all. But David was also, he was an EMT, and then he went on and put himself through, become a paramedic. And Judy was right there every inch of the way. She's been a fantastic person, I call her a friend. She is a very common sense type individual with a lot of great ideas. As you said, she pulled together the town center project, and it's been fantastic. It's been fantastic for the town. It helped to bring in people from outside into the town, with the different bands and some of the different events that they have spearheaded. Some, the Halloween, some of those types of events. She's going to be sorely missed. I understand, because you do get to a point where you just need to sit back and let things move on. And she's probably getting to that point. She has been such an energetic person for the town. It's going to be sad to not see her in that position, although I don't think that we can count her out. I'm sure she will be involved with different things. So I think it is with regret, but I understand there comes a point in time you need to do things for yourself as well. So, anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment, Dan.
Sure.
One thing you could say about Judy is she gets things done. She comes up with an idea and she's going to make it work. So every time you see those benches or any of the other art creations she's come up with, she's written her ideas right in the center of Hebron. She when I first got here, she got me to be involved, almost shames you to get involved. How about help me with these chairs? Can you do this? Can you do that? And you can't turn her down because she's a wonderful woman and she's very convincing. So it is going to be sad to lose somebody who's so passionate and who creates almost a shame that you don't do what she does, or you're not as caring or concerned as she is. I've been impacted by her, and to think better of what it is to be a citizen. So I got to thank Judy for that.
Okay, thank you. No other comments? The motion's been made. All in favor signify by saying aye. Tiffany,
Tiffany Teely, aye.
Mark,
Mark Rivera, aye.
Peter,
Peter Casper, aye.
and Gail.
Unmute. Okay, Gail Richmond, aye.
And myself, aye. Thank you all. Then we have a Parks and Recreation Commission appointment, and this is from Travis Carter, expressing an interest to be appointed to the Parks and Rec Commission. I'll make the motion and then open it up. Move that the Hebron Board of Selectmen appoint Travis Carter as a regular member of the Parks and Recreation Commission to a term to run until December 2023. Is Trevor on by chance or no?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Peter?
Am I voting?
Well, I was gonna say, have you?
I met, he was at the last Parks and Rec Commission meeting that I attended, so he does note that he's met that requirement, and so I don't know him other than him having joined a meeting.
Okay. Well, we have an opening. He's willing to sit there. He has been to a meeting. So, Tiffany?
Are we voting now?
Yes.
Okay, Tiffany Teely, aye.
Mark?
Mark Rivera, aye.
Peter?
Peter Casper, aye.
Gail?
Gail Richmond, aye.
And myself, aye. And then we have our fire police reappointments. And then it's moved that the Hebron Board of Selectmen reappoint the following as fire police with a term to run until January 31st, 2025. And that would be Gladys Bryant, Deborah Horton, and Walter Norris. And this is a thing that we do every 2 years, I think it is, the reappointing our fire police personnel. And that's, I believe, a statute that we have to do that. Tiffany?
Tiffany Teely, aye.
Mark?
Mark Rivera, aye.
Peter?
Peter Casper, aye.
And Gail?
Gail Richmond, aye.
And myself. Aye. Okay. Moving on. Town managers report, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we've been working with the town planner along with Mac McCorson and his partner on that Toomey Way project, trying to get that to move forward and bring an application in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So we've been spending quite a bit of time on that. Hopefully that application gets submitted soon. Of course, we're working on department budgets along with the CIP, which you'll see tonight, and then the overall town budget. We're diligently working on that, and we'll be quite tied up with that next week as well. The roof at the library was out to bid. We had one bidder that came in. We were hoping to get more, but I think as long as the one bidder meets all the criteria, the building committee will review that and they'll make a recommendation. I think that still meets the requirement as long as they do. but I'll leave that up to the building committee to discuss at a later date. Been working on that. CNG, Connecticut Natural Gas, started work down at the Stonecroft Village on that upgrade for the elderly housing. Of course, being the chairman of the Chatham Health District, we are heavily involved in that budget for the towns that belong to that. And the facility study for town of Hebron was opened up today. I think we got 3 bids. We'll be reviewing those with the building committee and bringing that forward with a recommendation. And of course, we're working on the Maple Fest with the Wyndham Chamber. That's the 3rd weekend of March. That's taken quite a bit of planning and dealing with certain entities. So I've been active with that most recently. So with that, if there's any questions, if not, you can move on.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Did you just want to just touch base on the facilities study again? This is, just so that people understand, this is a ongoing thing that we do. But I forgot what the year that the span was.
Yeah, so every so many years, we have appointed a building committee, which we are very lucky to have. They do a great job for us. I don't know what we would do without them. They've been a big help. The people on there are very educated. With that being said, they're taking care of multiple projects, as you just heard tonight. But multiple years, we do facility studies to give the town a report card on where our buildings are and what we should do. So at that time, again, we put it in the budget and we went out to bid. And like I said, I think I'm pretty sure we got 3 bids. One was within the budgetary number. The other 2 were a little bit inflated, but we'll work through that and come back with a recommendation. But this is something that we feel is important, something that has been put in place by previous boards of selectmen, and they come back with recommendations on what needs to be done to town-owned buildings and to be added to the budget of the CIP.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? If not,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
just
yes,
very
please.
quickly, if I can.
Sure.
Andy, I'm just curious. I know that we have some very cold weather coming, and I'm not sure if it would be helpful to just share with those listening and watching what protocols there are and where people can go for assistance, et cetera.
Right. So right now we follow the state's protocol. The state has activated the cold weather activation. So we're working with our emergency management director. Our library will be open on Saturday. We're going to be monitoring the weather. If people need to find a facility, you can always dial 211. And if that doesn't work, you can dial the fire department or 911, and they will give you the information. But as of right now, we only have the library that will be open normal hours unless things progress or we get complaints or calls that we need to open up or do something more.
Andy, can I piggyback off of Tiffany's question?
Sure.
Have we, is the generator up and running and is everything ready to go at RAM yet for it to be in an emergency facility, whether we have power outages, cold fronts coming in? When does that become a go?
Great question, Mark. So the quick answer is no, it's not in yet. We did receive the grant. There's quite a bit of process we have to go through to satisfy that grant. We're in the midst of doing that now. We had a government agency that would have fast-tracked that, but Connecticut DAS does not recognize that. So we're going to have to hire a firm and design it. We plan on using the local building committee, and like they don't have enough to do, along with the superintendent of Rams School. So that's still in the early planning stages to answer your question.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Okay. Next, since we have moved some things around, we are going to go to 9D, which would be the assessor.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I'd like to introduce Tina Carrera, our assessor. She's here tonight to talk about the 2022 grand list report.
Good
Tina?
evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm going to try to go as fast as possible, I promise. The 2022 grand list was signed on January 19th. It represented about a 1.75% increase over the prior grand list. Real estate increased by 0.89%, which was about 7 million in assessed dollars. The biggest factor for the real estate increase was the expiration for the exemption at Colebrook Village. You all had approved an exemption for them. I think it was a period of 5 years, I want to say. The last tax bills that went out this July, that was the last tax bill that they had an exemption. So this coming July is the first year that they're going to pay a full tax bill. And that last year for the exemption was 2.4 million. So of that 7 million increase, 2.4 million alone was just the removal of that exemption. Motor vehicle increased just under 5%. Unlike last year, the reason for the increase was not because valuation of motor vehicles went up. We actually had 300 more motor vehicles on our list this year, so 300 more motor vehicles registered in Hebron. As opposed to last year, some of you may have noticed your July tax bills, a lot of people's individual vehicles increased in assessment from one grand list to the other. You shouldn't notice that this coming July. Individual assessments for the most part did not increase. And then for personal property, it had the largest percentage increase at 17%, but the assessed value was only 3.8 million because personal property is the smallest portion of the grand list. The driving factor for personal property was actually Eversource. They reported an additional 3.5 million in assets. So of the 3.8 million, almost all of it was Eversource reporting additional assets. And then the last thing I wanted to mention before, if you have any questions or anything, is that any taxpayer who wants to appeal their assessment has one chance to do it every year. You can appeal your assessment to the Board of Assessment Appeals, but you have to submit an application by February 20th. So if you ever hear taxpayers complaining about those bills, send them to our office. We'll try to explain whatever we can, and we'll obviously let them know about the appeal process and their rights in that regard. That's all I wanted to touch on, but like I said, if you have questions, I'm here.
Anybody have any questions? Now, is there something in the paper that states that those people who want to appeal their assessments, is there something in the paper that people realize or can see, or is there something online so that people can just look up and say, oh, okay, I've got 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks?
Yeah. So the first thing is that the date doesn't change. So it's always February 20th. It is online. It is going to be in the town manager's report this week, and probably I'll keep continuing to put it in for the next couple weeks. And then, we could put it in something like the River East if that is something that, Andy or Donna wants to guide me with, if that's something that typically happens. There's no statutory requirement for putting like a legal ad out, but it doesn't hurt, to make sure that people know.
That's the thing. A lot of people they don't know. And so many times when they do attempt to do something, the clock has already expired.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, to find out if in fact anything was ever done. And all towns, I'm assuming, are the same then?
Yep, it's by statute. It's February 20th every year. Unless you get a grand list extension, then it's March 20th. You just push it off 1 month. Unfortunately, most people want to appeal once they get their tax bill in July, and by then it's 5 months too late, and you have to wait until the next go around, which is why I try to tell as many people as I can about it, but it's tough to get the word out to everybody.
See, this would be something that I would think the paper would want to do a regional story on, because it's a statewide thing. It's not just a Hebron or a Colchester or Marlboro. It's a
Nope.
statewide thing. And as I say, most people, I'm sure, do not know that there is a date that it has to be done by if they want to appeal their assessments. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Hi, Mark. Okay, perfect. Thank you very, very much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Okay, next we decided was going to be the EDC.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes,
Next
please.
would be item 9A, which is the tax abatement application for 14/16 Main Street. And attaches a recommendation from the Economic Development Commission in response to the application for tax abatement from L&J Properties for 14/16 Main Street. Copy of the Economic Development Incentive Program is attached and it was in your packet for reference. Our town planner, Matt Bordeaux, along with members of the EDC Commission, are in attendance to present and recommend to the board and explain exactly what they're asking for. So I don't know who wants to go first, if it's Matt or the
Well,
chairman.
I was just gonna ask a quick question, because this is our first kind of look at this, and we have so few of them come before us. Is this something that we have to take action on tonight, or is this something that we can, have a little bit of time to kind of digest and then make a decision next month?
Yeah, so I can quickly explain that. So it's a recommendation from EDC to the Board of Selectmen. You can take 3 steps. You can approve, you can deny, or you can amend. But I think tonight would be a good night to hear at least the explanation of why the EDC made this recommendation and people can get their arms around it. It's kind of tied their hands on how they can do the abatement. And I know Matt and the chairman of the board, along with Peter Casarella, have a very, very good explanation so people can understand it. So I think if you could just give them the floor to discuss that and explain it, and then if you want to table it to the next meeting, you do not have to vote on this tonight.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, why don't I go ahead and take the first crack at it. So thank you for having me. My name is Matt Bordeaux. I'm the town planner. I'm here tonight to discuss to you the recommendation from the Hebron Economic Development Commission regarding an application received under the Hebron's Economic Development Incentive Program. I'll refer to it as the program going forward because it's a lengthy title. The program was intended to encourage development and expansion of quality types of businesses. The program was created pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 12-65B, which allows municipalities to, quote unquote, fix the assessment of real property. The idea is that the assessment of improvements may be reduced to an agreed upon value, which is typically the percentage of a whole of the assessment, so that when the mill rate is applied to that assessment, the taxes due on the new improvements are reduced in a way that eases the financial burden on new construction or rehabilitation to projects over the life of the agreement. Now, the state statute further limits the agreement municipalities may engage in to maximum or no greater than 10 years. The program incentivizes development typically as annual costs that are based on the debt incurred based on upfront costs of a project. As those are taking a toll on a new project, the tax abatement is a way to relieve those early stages of the project as revenue can slowly catch up and make the project sustainable. So the project isn't actually, or the town isn't actually giving away any funds. What it's doing is reducing the amount of new revenue that is collected based on new projects. So anything that is currently collected will remain to be collected. So this is all about new improvements and the relief provided to new projects. So the application that was received by the Hebron Economic Development Commission is from Lori and Jason Tennell of L&J Properties LLC. As you're probably aware, Lori and Jason have engaged in a multi-phase project located in the Hebron Green Village District. That's our zoning district, which is a National Register historic district project located at 14 and 16 Main Street. Project is to renovate 2 existing historic structures. One is the existing historic Gale House. The other is the existing historic garage associated with the Gale House located to the rear, as well as to install parking and landscaping. The final phase of what is ultimately a $1.5 million investment is to construct a new mixed-use post and beam building to be located between the current Flower Girl Bakery and the American Legion building. The proposed construction of the new building is anticipated to be approximately $650,000. As the program is intended to be an incentive to encourage development, this application or this proposed agreement would only apply to the final phase of the project, or in other words, it's the $650,000 investment of the greater $1.5 million investment. That means that the Board of Selectmen, in the event you agree to approve an agreement, the improvements that already have been completed at 14 and 16 Main Street would still be assessed at their full value and taxed at their full value. And the agreement would only apply to the new construction of the proposed building. So we spoke to the assessor's office, and they estimate that based on the building features, market conditions, and comparable properties in the area, the proposed structure will have an assessed value of approximately $155,000. Therefore, at the 2021 grand list mill rate, the tax bill would be approximately $4,900 annually. That is what would be generated from the new construction. Of course, it should be noted that this is only an estimate, and it's anticipated that mill rate will fluctuate over the next however many years. So those are variable rates that will continue to change. For reference, I provided in your packet a report or a memo describing the project, describing the EDC's recommendation and the board's role in the program. I also included the Economic Development Incentive Program description, the application from the Tennells, a site plan highlighted to depict the proposed structures in their context with the surrounding existing conditions. I included a screenshot from a Google Street View taken from Main Street, looking at the buildings, in proximity to the proposed new construction. Architectural renderings of the proposed structure, a sketch of the proposed floor plan, and then a property tax clearance form from the tax collector's office. Neil Amwick, chairman of the Hebron Economic Development Commission, is here to discuss the EDC's recommendation. But if you have any questions related to the program, to the application itself, or to any of the material that I provided, be happy to answer those questions. If there's any questions, if there's not, I'll kick it over to Neil.
Peter.
Yeah, that the 155,000 assessment, that jumped out at me. That seemed, and not my area of expertise, but I was surprised to see that that low. Is that, I mean, could you just help me better understand that? It looks like a pretty impressive structure that'll be, I just have a hard time putting my hands around that value. And so could you help educate me a little bit more as to how that was arrived at? As a layman.
Can I jump in there? I stayed on because I figured this might come up.
Please.
Thank you.
So our last revaluation was October 1st, 2021. during COVID 2020, 2021, commercial valuation tanked. So when we have a new property, whether residential or commercial, built in 2022, 2023, we have to trend it back to our last revaluation.
Okay.
I did a lot of research because that is obviously a low value. A comparable parcel in town is Brain Freezers, it's obviously an older building, but it's retail below with apartment above. And full value, if it was brand new, matches right around where we have this. And I've looked at other towns as well that had a similar revaluation 2020 or 2021. So if you trended that up to now, it would be more than that. But we have to trend back because that's
so
just statute. But one further thing on it is 155,000 is assessed value, not market value. Assessment is 70% of market value. So we have a market value of about 220 based on the current plans.
Yeah, I just think about it from the perspective of, it seems to be more substantive than my home, and my home was valued at twice. I get it, it's apples and oranges maybe, but then my question is, if we go forward in 10 years, it's likely a reevaluation that the estimated tax abatement is going to be significantly more. It'd be hard to believe that that'll be that much over that period of time. I think it would be maybe a 50% more than what was originally that was projected in the documentation. At least that's how in my simple head I think about it. Is that likely to happen then? Probably, right?
I would bet everything that the value of this property would increase significantly at the next revaluation. Commercial valuation, including for retail, has already trended back upward. I actually just took an educational offering today about 2022 revaluation trends, and basically retail is right back on track to where it was pre-COVID. So it would almost certainly increase.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Following that same vein of thought then, right now, if you're looking at roughly 4,900 of the 2021 dollars, over 10 years, that's 49,000, not even including what all of the property increase would be. So even at today's pricing, what would that be? Is there any way of kind of guesstimating that?
I mean, I would be terrified of guesstimating that because it's two numbers that we don't know. The tax bill is the assessment multiplied by the mill rate. I have no idea what the mill rate will be any year, and I have no idea what the assessment will be in 3 years at the next revaluation. So that's a really scary thing to try to nail down. It's always in fluctuation, sort of.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, well, let's continue, and I'm not sure who's.
If I may, maybe this is not a question for Matt, maybe it's a question for Neil. But this is great stuff that they're doing. So we don't want to lose sight of the positive impact of this project and the previous work. Why wasn't this brought forward with the initial project? Was that something that was considered or just didn't come up? Or I was just curious because obviously they've invested quite a bit already in the project.
So I think thank you, Peter. I think there's a couple items to unpack here. And I first want to say thank you for Tina, because Peter, I had the same exact question you did when this application first came in front of the Economic Development Commission, and to the point where I made Matt Bordeaux go back to Tina twice, measure twice and cut once. So the valuation was very surprising, but it is the assessment, and we have to go with the numbers we have now. And so and we'll get into it a little bit. So let me follow up with your second question, Peter, it is the applicant's responsibility to come forward to the Hebron Economic Development Commission. And EDC does not look at buildings already with a certificate of occupancy. So I think we have to remember that on this parcel, there are 3 buildings. There are 2 buildings that have been extensively renovated. There is new parking structures, new parking lots, And then there is a new third building. So the tax abatement is strictly for this third building. So the other two buildings in the parking lot, regardless of what gets decided with the tax abatement, will always be at full assessment, full mill rate. So I want to point that out as well. I also want to point out, the previous time we did this, and Tina just spoke about it, was Colebrook Village. That abatement was a 5-year abatement, and it was tiered 100%, 80%, 60%, 40%, and then 20% was the abatement. What the Hebron Economic Development Commission is recommending for 16 Main Street, simply for the new building only, is a 10-year, 100% full abatement. And we had several discussions about this because it does come down to the dollars and cents. I think the Board of Selectmen knows, I know Peter knows, I'm an engineer, there were spreadsheets involved. We looked at this carefully. And as Tina said, we cannot look in the future. But if you go back to the Hebron Economic Development Incentive Program, this is a mixed use facility. As Matt said, this is in the center of town, high visibility, high traffic. It is mixed use, village green. We know the Flower Girl Cafe is doing great. We know the Flower Girl Bakery is doing great. We have Toomey Crossing. We have the pedestrian bridge that's going to go over to Patty Dunn's behind the library. We have the new library. This is the center of Hebron. We want to continue the success. And in your packet, if you look at the objectives of the Economic Development Incentive Program, this property hits all 4. Generate additional tax revenue through real estate and personal property. Well, the parcel's already doing it. There's 2 completely renovated buildings, provide employment opportunities. The staffing for the cafe, for the bakery, there's new retail, there's going to be a flower shop, and everyone who studied economics, wage and salaries, 70% tends to stay in the community. That's the statistic. Provide high quality goods and services, that goes for itself, and then conform to the goals and the policies of the Hebron Plan of Conservation and Development. So this property fits all 4. This, to the Economic Development Commission, was a marquee project. It's a high visibility project, and we ran the numbers for what the Tinnells are investing, not themselves, but also for what the town can leverage from this property. Tao has been successful across the street. It is where, we mentioned it earlier, the Town Center project. It's the center of Maple Festival. So there's a lot going on. And 10 years, 100% may seem like a lot. Yes, it may fluctuate. But I think when we look at the overall town budget, after we put in the education budget, this is a small price to pay for the benefit that the community is going to get back, both indirectly and directly. So that is some of the discussion the EDC had as to why we went forward with the 10-year 100% full abatement.
Go ahead, Peter.
I think
Yeah,
Donna, can you go to page 71 of the packet just so we can see that on the screen? Thanks, Donna. You're my Vanna. So,
with color too. That's nice.
Yes, thanks, Matt. The yellow is the renovated Gale House. Currently has a certificate of occupancy, full tax assessment, full mill rate. The blue is the garage. A certificate of occupancy has been issued already. Full tax, full mill rate. What we are talking about is the pink building. So it is only the new building, and it is only the structure. So I think this map is very important as to how we look at the overall economic impact of this parcel. So that, I guess, Matt and I will open it up to questions, and feel free to help you out. As the town manager said, no, you do have 60 days to act on this after receiving it. You can take the EDC recommendation, vote it forward. You can reject it, or the Board of Selectmen can modify it and then develop their own motion.
People,
Mr. Chairman?
go ahead, Pete.
No, go ahead, Mark, you go ahead. I'll go
Oh,
next.
thanks,
sorry.
Pete.
Yeah, sure.
Probably going to agree anyway. I'm in favor of an abatement. I'd like to have a little time to think about it. Maybe all of us need a little time to think about it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure currently as it exists is fair to other business owners just to pick one to give a tax abatement to. But I'm in favor of some kind of tax abatement, some kind of amendment, and some kind of relief to the Tennells and supporting business. So that's kind of where I stand, guys.
Pete?
Yeah, Neil, I just wanted to follow up on that. It is great stuff. But I'll tell you, sort of my unfiltered first reaction was I sort of anticipated seeing 5 years. Just out of my gut, just again, without reading through everything. And I imagine that you probably went around a bit on, and you've articulated clearly why you feel the full 10 years is what your recommendation is. But could you provide any perspective on maybe the additional perspective on the dialogue of anybody that might have been thinking more something other than 10 years? Or was that the consensus from the beginning? And, but I just was telling you, my first gut was, that sounds fantastic. How come it doesn't say 5? It just telling you unfiltered what I'm thinking.
My first spreadsheet, I ran with 5.
Okay.
And when I looked at it, we used the current assessment, 4,900 times 5. It just didn't feel significant enough for such a marquee property in the center of town, where it hits all the marks, and we're going to be able to leverage this and move this forward with other economic development incentives, with other community programs. That is where we went to 10. And so I think rather than look at the 10 years, I think you have to look at it, yes, it's 10 years, but even if it goes up, so what's the difference between 45 or 50,000, or really 25 or 30,000 over 5 versus maybe 50,000 or 60,000? Is the community going to get that difference back? What is our return on our investment? Colebrook Village, and Tina just mentioned it, was millions of dollars of abatement over 5 years. It was a shorter period of time, but it was a much larger property with a much greater assessed value. So we approached this differently from Colebrook. We looked at it on its own, on its merits on its own. And remember, the economic incentive program can only be for new construction. Once you have a certificate of occupancy, you no longer can apply for the economic incentive program. Case in point, several years ago, after Extramart was constructed, they approached the town about a tax abatement. And we said, no, you're constructed. You look at the yellow building, the Gale House, you look at the garage, the blue house, those are both non-applicable because they have COs already. But circling back, Peter, we did look at 5, and then we just all kind of said, you know what? It just doesn't, we're more comfortable with 10.
Okay. And if I may, I'm very interested, which I apologize for all my questions, but I'm just very interested in it. It's just great stuff to talk about. And clearly, it's way more fun than some of the other stuff we talk about, to be honest. And I don't want to make it more complicated, but when you think of an amendment, if there's ever an amendment, is it even conceivable to consider an amendment that has a ceiling on what the tax break would be? So I'm not making it complicated, but say you agree to 10 years with no more than, I don't know, $80,000 in tax benefits. So if the assessed value does spike, or spikes more than once, the town, at least understands that we have a defined tax abatement, not something that's open-ended relative to what would clearly be an anticipated increase in value. Or is that just sort of overthinking it? And you can tell me.
I think I would have to go back to the state statute, or the town attorney would have to go back to the state statute And, I'm not a lawyer. I don't proclaim to be one. I don't play one on TV. I don't
Yes,
know if the
You
state
do. You
statute,
paid at a Holiday Inn. Yes, you do. You're fine.
and then I will look back is that,
Yeah.
we didn't put a cap on Colebrook.
Yeah.
I think Colebrook, the abatement was over $1 million. So, even if we go 10 years at 4,900, let's just call it 50,000 for math sakes, because we're clearly in the weeds now on the mathematics. Colebrook Village was 20 times greater than what we're talking here. Granted, Colebrook Village is eventually going to be one of the largest taxpayers in Hebron. Case in point, I was on the EDC back when Colebrook Village came in front of us, and I initially wasn't in favor of the tax abatement for Colebrook Village. I will admit that. And then the assessor came to us and said, well, it's only being assessed as farmland right now. It's about $3,000 a year. I remember this conversation. And so what you have to remember is Colebrook Village, after 5 years, they're now at full boat. So you look at 1416 Main Street, we have 2 buildings at full boat. We have a parking lot at full boat. And so we're only talking 1 building. And after 10 years, it's back to full assessment. I think I would be, and I don't mean to sound cavalier, but I looked it up. The town portion of the budget is $10 million. What we're really debating here is $5,000-$6,000 a year for years 6 through 10. In some businesses, quite frankly, that's a rounding error.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, I think it's more to Mark's point, the way I'm thinking about it, which is, setting a precedent, hopefully for future development, but it sort of sets a precedent potentially. That's all.
So we've had 2 of these in 7 years.
Yeah, no, I know.
I don't think that's precedent forming, and I think you need 3 points to draw a line. Right now, we only have 2 spots, and the EDC took and looked at this independently from Colebrook. I don't think this is precedent setting.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please, Gail.
I don't think it's just the dollar amount here. We're talking about the appearance to the town residents. Somebody is going to a 10-year, no tax at all. Like I said, the dollar amount, but to go to someone that doesn't pay any taxes on that building for 10 years is going to be very upsetting to taxpayers. If it was 5 years with a sliding scale, but I can't go 10 years with no taxes coming from that building at all. It will leave a bad taste in the mouth of our voters, even though the dollar amount is not that high. And I do believe in tax incentives. I have to give them, and I think we should. But this is a little too much for me to swallow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
If I could respond, Gail, the EDC has made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. They can take that recommendation, they can vote it up, they can vote it down, or they can create your own. There's no emotions
Or we
here.
can send it back to EDC to redo. Yes.
That will, as chairman of the EDC is firm that we stand behind the 10 years full abatement. If you send it back to the EDC, I will think that I cannot promise, I can only speak on behalf of myself, but I think that would be a Pyrrhic exercise. It was voted 3-0 by the 3 members present to present this to the Board of Selectmen. If the Board of Selectmen wants to cut it down to 5 years, that's their decision. Don't make the EDC be the bad guys. We've made a recommendation. It's up to the Board of Selectmen to act, which is what the town ratepayers, taxpayers voted you to do.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something I said. What I said was beyond precedent. It was just creating an appearance, kind of what Gail alluded to, that there's other businesses in town and they work hard and they make investments, whether it be from the ground up or just improving the existing structure, and they're not getting anything. So I didn't want to create the appearance of favoritism, and I understand incentives for future development, and I understand your whole point about after you get your CO, you can't get it. I take a little offense to you saying, don't make you guys look like the bad guys. We're just trying to figure out something fair here. I'm kind of in line with Gail. 10 years seems a little excessive. You said originally you thought 5 was a good number. I'd be in favor of 5, and I don't know how the
5 I can deal with,
like,
yeah.
so that's my piece about that.
Tiffany?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just been listening and kind of just thinking. So I've just been kind of listening to the conversation, which has been really helpful. As a general rule for myself personally, I tend to have a very mixed opinion of tax incentives for businesses, which is probably more broadly my issue with more on a federal scale, a national scale of businesses and their rate of taxation, et cetera, which is a conversation for another day. I do think that this piece of property is important and pivotal to the center of Hebron, especially as we're trying to build it up to make it a destination. I'm also stuck on the 10 years, though, to be honest with you. I think that is a long time for somebody or, to not pay taxes. So certainly I appreciate the chairman's comment. It is on us to make a decision, right? Because we have a recommendation, so it's on us to act. I don't know if we want to do this tonight. I mean, I'd kind of like to think on it, I think a little more, but certainly I could consider a 5-year abatement. I think that would be fair and demonstrate our commitment to downtown. So those are just some of my thoughts. I've appreciated the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, well,
myself. Yeah, go ahead.
Man, we
Go.
have 3 5s right now, so 3 people for 5 years right now. So why pass the business along if we can agree tonight?
Well, I mean, Tiffany did ask for a little
Yeah.
time to think about it.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah, well,
you putting
okay.
on 2 weeks, it doesn't really, we have 60 days. So, I mean, if
Okay.
somebody wants to think about it some more, I'm not adverse to that, Mark. I mean,
Okay.
I'm over the world. I'll vote on, whatever's presented. I mean, I'm ready. I'm sort of that my mindset. There's great information and I'll make a decision and I'll vote. But if somebody wants more time, I'm not adverse to it.
I mean, if there's a motion presented, I'll vote on it. It just seemed that our flavor was maybe not to act on it tonight, but if we've kind of shifted in that, if there's a motion, I'll vote. So if that's at all helpful.
I'm okay with voting for tonight if it's 5 years.
And would it be a 5-year no tax? And then full tax on year 6?
Yeah,
I'm just
that's how I
questioning.
understand
Yeah.
it. And even if it goes up after the assessment at 3 years, say it goes up to 40,000, let's confirm the 5 years. And if it goes up beyond what's expected, that's fine. I think the 5 years is kind of key.
Okay.
I guess I what I would want to understand just, and maybe this is something where the town manager needs to weigh in. So if we have this recommendation and we want to move forward with 5 years, I just want to make sure from a statutory legal perspective that that's okay. I'm assuming it is, but I think that would be helpful for people to hear.
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany. Mr. Chair, may I comment?
Yes, please.
So this is everybody trying to do the best they can for Hebron. I know everybody involved is very smart. The one thing that wasn't really made clear, and I'm sure you probably already know it, but I need to say it for the listening public, is the actual formula that they have to use dictates how it's done. So they can't do 5 years and change the numbers. It only goes after the assessment. That's the whole reason the EDC went to the 10. I know you guys understand. I just want to make that clear. That formula is quite clear. Not only if a building has a CO, the new construction, you can only use it by the assessed or the 70% assessed value of the property. So that's what they were trying to do. That's why they bumped it to 10. But with that being said, Neil stated it, I stated it earlier, you can approve, reject, or amend it, and then that would be legal to sign into a contract if the parties so felt that was appropriate.
Mr. Chairman, if I could put one further data point into the discussion, the value of the abatement for Colebrook Village was approximately $1.081 million.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a 5-year tiered abatement, but I just wanted to put the data out there. That was something we did consider, and Colebrook Village is a larger taxpayer in town. But we looked at the assessed value. Assessments could go up, mill rates could go up or down. EDC unanimously was comfortable with a 10-year full abatement for a single structure on a multi-structure parcel.
Okay. Thank you. I think, and again, and I have the same problem too. I'm looking and I'm going to have to try to tell people why we are allowing a brand new building to go in and not have to pay any taxes for 10 years. Yet somebody buys and renovates a building and their taxes start at day one. I believe in the tax abatement program, but I too just feel that 10 years is going to leave a really bad taste in a lot of taxpayers' mouths, especially when they look at what they're paying on taxes. Yeah, I just it's not the dollar amount as much as it is the 10 years. Yeah,
It's the appearance.
and that's what we have to worry about and explain. We're the ones that everybody's going to, point the finger at, saying, how come? Yes, Peter.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure I understand procedurally. So, and I think, Neil, you mentioned it, so I'm not looking to open up a wound here with the commentary you had in Gail in terms of sort of the onus on the Board of Selectmen. But if we were, just to make sure I understand it, so if we were to deny it as an example, just for argument's sake, what happens? Does it die or do you come back?
My understanding is that Economic Development Commission has made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. It is now in your sandbox to move on.
Right, but if we denied it, could it be represented, or is it just, and maybe it's an Andy question? It just is off the agenda, and there's nothing else. We have to amend it ourselves or deny it. Is that right, Andy?
Yes.
That's how I perceive it. They made a recommendation.
Okay.
You either approve, deny, or the Board of Selectmen amends it to something that's palatable.
Okay. All right. I mean, you said that a couple of times. I just want to sort of continue to make sure I'm 100% clear as to what our options are. Okay. Thank you.
This was one of the reasons why I stayed right in the beginning. We do have time. It does not need to be done tonight. If we want to just kind of mull it over, maybe try to get some other facts. I'm not sure what other facts are out there, rather than jumping into something tonight. We do have what did you say? 60 days, I believe I heard someone say. Yeah. Also, it gives us a chance to kind of maybe feel out others to get an idea. As I say, I know what my thoughts are, but they could change.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, maybe I recommend we table it for 2 weeks, put it on old new business, and we'll have a chance to have thought about it, so we're not sort of emotionally reacting, and then make a decision at the next meeting.
Is everybody okay with that?
That
Tiffany?
works for me. That works for me.
Okay. Gail?
Okay.
Mark?
That's fine with me.
Peter? And myself, yeah. Give us a little chance to kind of discuss it, think about it. We may have other questions. as I say, it's such a new program. This is actually, in fact, the only second time in all the years that I've been involved that I think we've had it come before us. So, so I thank both Neil, Matthew for all the work they've put into this. And would hope that you two are reachable if our members have other questions as well. Okay. Should that all go through you, Andy, probably, or?
Whatever easy, you can shoot me an email. I'll put you in contact with them, however, whatever works best.
Okay. Well, I just try to not have everybody going off on their own directions.
I appreciate that.
Just to try to keep some sort of cohesiveness or whatever.
Well, Matt's in-house. Neil has a profession. I think it's a lawyer on TV, but.
Oh. Okay. Great. Either one of you two gentlemen have anything else you wanted to add, or?
No.
I don't think so. I am accessible, so feel free if there's any questions. I think there may have been a couple points related to the program and how it can be applied, that I can clarify for some folks, particularly related to, the idea of this being an incentive. So how it can be applied, it's not just new construction. If there is going to be an improvement in an assessed value, someone can make an application to abate that increase in the assessed value. So there's different ways it can be applied. But once work is complete, it's no longer, quote unquote, an incentive to do something. So
someone could buy an old building and say, I want to turn it into a popsicle stand and apply for this abatement?
if it results in an increase in the assessment, then yes.
Okay.
And
But
the other
Dan,
caveat is that this is limited to substantially commercial buildings. It's not for single family residential structures.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, popsicles are commercial. No.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
but Dan, the money for the popsicle stand, it doesn't happen until the CO is issued. So it's not like somebody's going to come in, get some money and leave town.
Right.
No, I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Okay. Okay. As I say, this is such a new program to us. This is only the second time that I can remember that it's even come before us. So, and I know there is, there has been discussion where people went, we had both sides on Colebrook. And one of the things was that, with them initially starting and they did not have full occupancy, they only had literally originally maybe 2 or 3% of the place was occupied. So they had nothing coming in to pay high taxes on. And part of the discussion then was that as more people came into the facility, they would have more, money to be able to pay taxes and what have you. So, that was one of the other considerations that was, I believe, discussed to us when that abatement was given, or that incentive, however you want to word that. So, anyway, okay. As I say, I think we would like to table this until our next meeting. And again, I ask that we try to reach out and contact to get whatever other information we need so that we can make a decision at our next meeting. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay. Next would be the
I
public.
believe
work.
we're at 8B, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
What I would recommend, there's 3 items here. They're not listed in any type of sequence, but in the time, in the sense of time, I would suggest if the Board of Selectmen were willing to, is let the Public Building Committee go before the conversation regarding the public information, or the other one on the bottom of the page about the CIP budget.
Okay,
That's up to the Board of Selectmen. If you want, the building committee's been waiting patiently.
yes. I think that's what our next is, correct? Or,
Yeah, just under 8B, it lists, there's 3 proposals on there. One is the public information strategy.
oh,
for the
okay.
And then the second one, but it's not in any, it wasn't aligned that way. So if the Board of Selectmen are okay with letting the building committee go, I think you can take up the other
Yes,
2
please.
items after. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. Steiner and Mr. Lecter, if the committee's okay with that.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, member of the Board of Selectmen, as you had requested at the last meeting, you asked us to take the 5 concepts that we had put together and further elaborate the advantages and disadvantages. And we did complete that a couple of weeks ago, and I know Donna sent that out to every member. What we deliberately tried to do is, rather than list bullet points, we felt it was really important to articulate in complete sentences exactly as much detail and with clarity what the advantage and disadvantages. We were very concerned right from the outset, if we just put bullet points in, it would just leave too much for misinterpretation. I'm at your disposal if you want me to go through each one of them. We actually started off with 5 and kind of morphed it into 6, but then it got reduced back down to 5. If you want me to hit the highlights in each concept, I can, or
I think it's important. Yes, please.
Okay. Well, concept number 1 is reusing the old Colchester Road site. And 2 things became very apparent in order to make that work. And as far as the availability of the site, became very apparent that number 1, that some operation of the Department of Public Works needed to be either terminated or relocated. And we spent a lot of time with town personnel, town agencies, and one of the things that became apparent was to somehow deal with the transfer station, either terminating it and offering curbside pickup to all the residents, or to find another alternative site to relocate it. That would free up land. But as we started to work with the town engineer, it became apparent that not only would the transfer station need to be dealt with as far as removing it from Old Colchester Road, but also became very apparent that the land that was originally considered to be purchased from Eversource would become a necessity in order to support some of the infrastructure that would be needed to maintain, to construct and build a new municipal facility down there. Some of the obvious advantages is that it is the current operation. The state and local permits are already in place. The disadvantages is that somehow the Board of Selectmen and the town need to grapple with what happens with the transfer station. How does that get dealt with? And they're not easy solutions. Finding a relocation for it will take time. And the question is, can an alternate site be found? And what will be the
permitted? And permitted.
Yeah,
that's right, and permitted. Now raises a good point. One of the things that we heard, both on a more on a state level from DEP and other state agencies, we need to consider when we talk about any alternative site is the permitting time. And particularly if we're talking about 2 different sites, just the lead time in getting approvals before construction can begin. So there's the whole issue of the transfer station, whether it gets relocated or whether it gets terminated completely. And that is really Board of Selectmen issue and decision needs to be made. And
Richard,
as Mal said,
can you clarify that we're talking recyclables and MSW, not bulky?
right, as the narrative indicated, the bulky waste would absolutely still remain at Old Colchester Road. And some of the other disadvantages with the existing site, they're pretty obvious. There is no public sewers down there, which means that the existing storm system would need to be reworked and renovated and updated. There is no public water, so that presents an issue relative to Department of Public Works on the wash bays. Everything would have to go into underground holding tanks and then be pumped out. And there is no public sewer. And the septic tank right now is in the process of failing. So a new septic system with leaching fields would need to be part of the new construction. And the last thing is there is no single phase power. So that presents a specific challenge relative to being able to charge EV type vehicles at some points in the future.
If I can add to that, some of the peripherals are that that's about a two year build time beginning to end, and there's major regrading that has to be done there to get a flat spot to put a garage. We have no place really with any shelter to house the current equipment for that period of time. So we would have to come up with a plan for that, whether it included temporary shelter or it was just open space. And I don't mean open space. I mean unused property where we would keep that equipment while the renovations and construction are done at that site. So that's really a peripheral thing, but it's also something that selectmen in the town would have to plan for. Thank you, Rich.
The other thing that is contained in the narrative, and I can't overemphasize this, with Kevin trying to do his, and the personnel from Department of Public Works trying to do their daily task, and having a contractor down there trying to build the new work. It's going to be an extremely tight site. There's going to be disruption to Kevin's operation. It's going to be multi-phases. It's going to be a longer construction process. The reality is, as you can well appreciate, whether you're renovating a school or an office building, if you're trying to do it around an occupied facility, whether it's a school, an office, a hospital, the construction duration gets longer and the costs get longer because obviously the general contractor's trades are going to be on site longer. But the biggest issue is that there's going to be times when Kevin and his team are going to have to do a significant juggling act down there. It's something that everybody needs to go in recognizing, and the committee's had long conversations with Kevin, and he understands that there's going to and interruptions and the disruptions are going to be, they're unforeseen at this point. Nobody has a great crystal ball. With great planning, we can kind of minimize them, but we need to understand from a cost perspective that the construction duration is going to be significant. We will be significantly longer down at Old Colchester Road.
Okay.
Before I move on to concept 2, I'll definitely welcome any other questions. But before we move on,
I have a couple. One of the things you had stated was the Eversource property. How much of that Eversource property, because of the wetlands, is actually buildable? And how would that fit into actually trying to do something down there? That's the first question. And the second question is, and it came up again, all of Hebron is GA. In fact, all of the surrounding communities are GA. We keep hearing, this is a GA area. Well, guess what? The whole portion of Eastern Connecticut is GA. Now, there is a potential area under the capped landfill and down by New Tech which is questionable. But my question is, why would we want to drill a well in an area that may be questionable? Now, right now, so far, the water has always come back good. But if we drill a well down there and it does, for whatever reason, show some sort of contamination, from the capped landfill or whatever, we have no options to get water there, or not without huge monies, because you're talking basically, well, actually, the closest water would be from the center. So,
No, you're correct, Dan. That's a possibility. And we're not, and I want to make clear that when we did this, and it sounded earlier in the public comments that we prioritize things. These are not prioritized. We just tried to put down simple facts for all the sites. And we wanted to tell you the good and the bad. And as you go along with this, we can't hit everything, but as you go along with this, these are some of the side issues that could raise their head. I mean, all the wells around there are fine right now. You've got a house 140 feet away. His well is fine. So, what can we say? And by the way, there are two other that property is GAA. It's potentially, the water could be unsuitable. There's another one down on Millstream Road. It's the original landfill in town. And there's another very small, what's that called up in the northeast corner, Andy? The hilltop or hill?
Up by Prentice Hill.
Yeah, Prentice Hill. Thank you. Those are two spots that are GAA. So to say that the entire town is GA, in general, that's correct, but there are the three small areas that are not. The Prentice Hill is not big enough. Millstream Road, you would have the same issues because it's all, I believe it's also on the Genes, the Canterbury, however you pronounce that.
Canterbury Nice.
Nice, yeah. So, but we want the facts to be out there 100% accurate. And we've tried to hit the high points here. And I mean, we really don't want to take up your whole night here. I mean, there could be night-long discussions on every one of these sites. And maybe that's what we need to do in the fashion of a workshop or, a public meeting. But that's, we're trying to give you the high points of the pluses, the high points of the minuses here. But what you've listed, what you've mentioned is absolutely a possibility. I mean, we could end up for water, bringing in spring water for sanitation. We could still use a polluted well to clean trucks, I'm guessing. But we would deal with that as we came along.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Chairman, let me answer your questions regarding the Eversource property. Somewhere between 1 to 2 acres is usable of that parcel. And that the 1 to 2 acres is adjacent to Old Colchester Road. And based on some preliminary work that we have done as a committee with the town engineer, that part of the land would be used to support stormwater construction and things of that nature. These are, again, preliminary, but it became very apparent that as we tried to look at reusing Old Colchester Road, two things needed to happen. Some operation needed to get jettisoned out of there. And the other thing that became very apparent is that the available flat buildable land from Eversource needed to be purchased by the town. And let me go on and answer the second part of your question. There is other land that is part of that Eversource parcel, but there's two issues with it. First of all, it's all wetlands. And the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection does not differentiate between man-made wetlands and naturally creating wetlands. What was down there was wetlands created in the 1910s, 1920s. As far as they're concerned, it's wetlands and it's not buildable. Nor if it was buildable would the town consider building on it, because the grade difference between Old Colchester Road to the lowest point of the wetlands is somewhere between 25 to 30 feet. And that would create not a good construction site plan, particularly for a Department of Public Works where you have heavy vehicles and large vehicles going from Old Colchester Road down to some facility and having that type of grade. What makes it more alarming would be that type of grade where you would have periodically residents coming down there to discard bulky waste, oil, or antifreeze. It just is not a good design, site plan design. And there were some comments about possibly building something on the capped landfill.
Yeah.
State statute specifically prohibits building on capped landfills. And even if there was some sort of waiver granted, the town of Hebron would never want to consider that. We have a neighboring town, and I'll offer this. We have a neighboring town that kind of pushed the envelope, and they did some, shall I say, passive construction over a capped landfill. And it did not work out for the residents. Residents were using the facility and they were reporting to the town that they were getting sick. And what they were getting sick from was methane poisoning.
Oh.
So, we really these are the things that we didn't include, but if there's those type of questions relative to the Eversource property or the Lacan landfill, they're just not usable land, except for the 2 acres from Eversource that faces and is adjacent to the west side of Old Colchester Road.
Thank you. Anybody have any other questions on this one? Hearing none, please continue.
The second concept we considered was Burnt Hill Park. Part of the plan when the property was purchased was the concept that ultimately that site could be used for future Department of Public Works. And inevitably, as the plans were laid out and additional tagging of the wetlands were performed, it became very apparent that the wetlands were much greater than what was initially anticipated. And as the plans were developed and the playing fields were laid out, less and less land became available for any type of future DPW facility. And we looked at, okay, what would it take? What kind of land that is available currently, and what kind of land would be necessary in order to put a full DPW facility up there? Initially, we thought that taking one of the playing fields might be enough. But typical playing fields 1.5 acres with the land that's available, that's on that's kind of passive right now. And working with town agencies and some preliminary plans, it became very apparent that taking one playing field, it would not be enough. The town would actually have to take over 2 playing fields along with the small parcel that is kind of passive up there in order to construct a viable DPW facility. That creates the issue of the town having to destroy those fields and then reconstructing them somewhere else. And the fact of the matter is that when those playing fields were constructed, they were constructed based on the best practices and requirements for playing fields with under drains and special soil construction so that they drain and they don't retain water. So I mean, some of the advantage was that it was initially identified when Burnt Hill was planned. The disadvantage is the added time and cost of having to reconstruct those playing fields somewhere else. one of the other concerns is that the typical DPW hours of operation conclude around 3:30 in the afternoon. And then the playing fields start to see their activities Monday through Friday around 3:30 in the afternoon. So there's going to be that short period of time where there will be the Department of Public Works vehicles coming in and out, and park patrons, players, athletes, coaches, referees, school buses of kids coming up there. So that is a concern. And then if a facility is built up there, then obviously there's that at least 1 year of construction vehicles entering and exiting the site while the facility is being built. And I mean, it goes without saying that there could be pushback from Parks and Rec. There could be pushback from neighborhood residents, and there could be pushback from, patrons of the park, having to have some kids play at Burnt Hill and some kids that they've got to drop off at some other remote location. Similar to Old Colchester Road, Burnt Hill Park shares the same kind of deficiencies relative to public utilities. There is no public sewers. There is no public water, and there is no public sanitary sewer. Public water, as far as the water, probably a well would probably need to be drilled. In regards to the stormwater, there would have to be retention basins built. And as far as the wash off of the trucks, there would have to be underground storage tanks installed with the water being pumped out on a regular and routine basis. And then there's the issue again of just there being only single phase power along East Street. And again, Eversource has indicated it is not in their horizon anytime soon. And there's really no reason for them to bring three-phase power up. So this presents another issue, a similar issue on how to be able to power EV powered equipment. And there's two other things that, as Mal said, as we put this together, we sometimes forget about some of the other things that we learned along the last 12, 13 years about dealing with this project. But one of the other things about putting a DPW facility up at Burnt Hill Park is one of probably the most paramount issues is that's going to further exacerbate a parking issue. And if one was to the park when there is a full-fledged of activities, parking is a real problem. And so by taking more real estate and not addressing parking would create a greater hardship for the park operations. And the other thing that is apparent, and by taking more real estate, one thing that has to be kept in the forefront of any design plan is not eradicating passive area for storage of outside material for the Parks and Rec department. Right now, they have a very small area. They import topsoil and grading material. And so whatever plan, if it's pursued on Burnt Hill Park, it needs to take in consideration not shortchanging them on parking and not shortchanging them on passive areas to stockpile material that they use all throughout the year. Before I move on, Mal and I sure will answer any questions if anybody has any at this time.
Anybody have any questions? I just have one comment. It just came to my attention because I had to go up for a repair. Some of the fields are actually used for the water dispersal areas of their septic systems too.
Yeah.
So that I never realized that. I had to go up, they had a pump issue. And quite literally that's where the fields are, for those systems. You have the bathrooms up on top, and then you have the one in the building, which is piped down to fields down below. So I have no idea what that would create for issues, depending on what fields would be repurposed for this facility. So that right there could be a game changer or a deal breaker. I don't know.
Dan, you're absolutely right. Those are two considerations that need to be taken into the fold about thinking about Burnt Hill Park, that it's going to affect some of the existing infrastructure that is there that's passive underneath the playing fields. So it's part of, it's definitely something that's going to need to be considered.
And, Danny, as you said, there may be other things we find as we go along there, but I will speak as a member of the Board of Finance and as a resident. We're still paying for those fields. I can't imagine that we would want to tear them up. Put aside the inconvenience to moms and dads having kids at separate locations, the inconvenience or the loss of continuity for the rec department. I want to make clear to the Board of Selectmen, we were looking for space, and this is on there because we could come up with a method to get space there. Not saying it's the best, not saying it's the worst, but it is possible. So when you consider these possibilities, just would ask that you keep not only the Public Works Department in mind, but the rest of the town. And I know you will.
Thank you. I guess number 3.
Number 3, the Lions Fairground. We met with some members of the town office in November, and building committee presented that as an option. And unbeknownst to us, about several years ago, the town did approach the Lions Club on that very topic. And the response several years ago was that they weren't really not in favor of giving up any of their real estate for either a DPW facility or a salt shed. And again, we requested that the town go back to the Lions folks and ask them again. And again, the answer was the land they have is just totally committed. They don't have anything that they can spare. And so without a lot of more detail, it's just simply a non-starter as far as the Lions Club was concerned. The next concept we looked at was the John Horton Boulevard property, building the actual building, the garage and the offices of the Department of Public Works, with the major exception of finding a location for the salt shed at a location to be determined. And here again, the issue, well, let me talk about the advantages, is that, it's pretty obvious with the DPW in the center of town. It's right near to the arterial roads of Route 85 and 66. There's public sewer, public water. The water out of the wash bays would be treated on site underground in the holding retention ponds. And ultimately, when it was clean enough, it would get discharged into the sanitary sewers. The biggest issue with this is finding an alternative location for the salt shed. And if it's not Old Colchester Road, which is kind of concept number 4A, finding a site and getting it permitted and getting it approved, and the added cost of procuring the land that the town doesn't currently own. All of that adds again to the construction duration, because before you build a DPW garage, you really need to know where you're going to put this remote salt shed. And the thing that the Board of Selectmen need to understand, and it's important, it's a logistical issue for the DPW's operation. Having a remote salt shed presents routine issues for them during the winter, especially where the trucks will get dispatched out of John Horton Boulevard, need to go to some remote location to be filled. The issue with that is that if the trucks get filled and the storm is less severe or is not a severe storm, or even if there's material left over, the trucks need to go back to wherever the salt shed is. They need to offload. They need to come back to the new facility on John Horton Boulevard. They need to get washed out all of that adds mileage and time and really non-productive time for the DPW staff.
You would also, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rick.
Aside from which, having a remote salt shed means that you need to have a remote loader to load the vehicles both during the day and at night. So it really presents logistical issues for the Department of Public Works. And in a way, in the winter months, you're really decentralizing the DPW's operation when you have those winter storm events.
Yeah, it would impact the emergency operations during a winter or during severe storms where you've got staff in multiple locations. Kevin had a real long explanation on why having it decentralized from the rest of the facility is an issue. And yes, it is an issue in some respects, and it may have to, as I've heard my good friend Mr. Casper say, we need to negotiate. We need to come to an agreement. We've got to give, we've got to take, and that may be one of the things we have to give on. So I think we have to approach this with an open mind. Realize that we also, by the way, had, and I don't think we put it in there, but we had talked about, well, the salt shed might be able to go at Burnt Hill. Do we want to put it there? No, for the reasons Richard already expounded on, just with the traffic and with the access and with the neighbors and with everything else, probably not. But I mean, that was one of the things that we did talk about. So just, a lot of management issues and inefficiencies involved with separating it, but it can be done. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the most immediate thing, and we want to be as transparent and put as much facts out there as possible relative to each one of these scenarios. The reality in a storm event, when Kevin calls his drivers in, they would have first to go to John Horton Boulevard, start the vehicles up, get them ready, and then move to wherever the salt shed is, get loaded. So, I mean, for the town residents, there might be a little bit of a delay in responding to the weather event. So, I mean, that is something that is a reality. As Mal said, is it insurmountable? No, but I think as we all go forward, we need to understand that is one of the drawbacks of having a salt shed remote from where the trucks would be parked. Any questions before Mal and I move on?
I'm sorry. Did anybody have any questions? Okay. My question actually is probably for Andy. How do they get the salt back out of the trucks? You just can't dump it.
Yeah, they return back to the site and they dump it off the back through the tailgate.
Okay, so they can just dump it that way?
Yep.
Because with the sander units and all?
Yeah, the sander units in the new vehicles are underneath the trucks now, so they have a chain that delivers it to the spinner. But when you're not using that, you can shut that off and just dump it off like a normal dump truck.
Okay. I know that putting it down to Old Colchester Road has been at least, discussed by myself and all. It is, to me, if that would cure a lot of the issues, I would be happy to make that concession. I'm just not sure that would cure any of the issues. But thank you. What do we have next?
Well, that's actually it, Mr. Chairman. Concept 4A is John Horton Boulevard property for the part of the DPW garage only, with the salt shed being relocated to Old Colchester Road. And then here's the advantages. The salt shed would be located on a site that's already permitted both state and locally. We're hoping that might assuage some of the criticism of the plan about putting the salt shed on John Horton Boulevard. It would still give Kevin and the Department of Public Works, centrally located facility, all the advantages of the utilities that are afforded off of Route 66, public sewer, public water, three-phase power. The disadvantage would be, again, during winter months, DPW would be a little bit decentralized. They would be dispatching the trucks out of John Horton Boulevard. They'd have to go down Old Colchester Road to get filled up. And again, after a storm event, if there was sand and salt left over, they would need to return to Old Colchester Road, dump the material, then come back to John Horton Boulevard and get the trucks, washed out in the wash bay. In looking at the Old Colchester Road facility in its totality, the first thing is the salt shed would need to be replaced. It is just not in good condition. In fact, there isn't any structure on Old Colchester Road that's worth trying to save. And then that was a report that we made to your board several years ago. There's nothing salvageable up there. So at the very least, the cost on Old Colchester Road would be constructing a new salt shed and constructing a small office with bathroom facilities for the crews that would be down there, potentially overnight, loading the trucks, and for the truck drivers that would come down there, that might need to temporarily use the rest facilities. So there would be cost on John Horton Boulevard and cost over at Old Colchester Road.
Richard, can I add something to that?
Sure.
There have been some questions that I've had from several members in the community of, we keep talking about excess storage down at Old Colchester Road. And why do we keep talking about that? Well, we keep talking about that because if there are things like the vans are often kept down there, wood chippers, we have lean-tos, we may have to build some other shelters, but we're trying to limit the new space that we build. And for things that aren't used on a regular basis, we own the property on Old Colchester Road. Things that are just going to take up new square feet that we don't use don't need to be in the middle of the operation. So that's why we keep talking about excess storage down there. There's, as Richard said, it was determined multiple years ago that there's not a structure down there worth keeping. And that is true, but maybe for the short term, we would keep not the current garage, the current public works garage, but the storage garage across the parking lot from it. But that's just one reason, or that is the main reason why we're not abandoning that site completely. So thank you.
Just a couple quick points to what Mal just said. A number of pieces of equipment that are seasonal are stored by DPW up at Burnt Hill Park. However, there's pieces of equipment that there's not room for it up there. But one of the things that the building committee heard, because we took tours of probably a half a dozen, maybe 8 different newly constructed DP facilities throughout the state. And one of the things that we heard time and time again was, if you're going to build a new facility, don't be short-sighted, particularly when it comes to very expensive pieces of equipment. Because if you're going to take a piece of equipment that's going to be subjected to winter and sun and the environment, you can expect that piece of equipment you'll need to retire it anywhere between 5 to 8 years versus storing it inside. Excuse me. I met with the DPW, the building committee met with the DPW director of nearby town, and he said, if you take a piece of equipment that's worth $100,000 or $250,000, and you're suddenly saying, well, life expectancy is X, but I don't have a place to store it out of the weather, I'm going to have to retire it anywhere to 5 to 8 years ahead of its natural useful life. That's a pretty tough pill for a town to have to financially swallow. And I didn't believe that information. And after we left, I got an email from this DPW director who actually sent me 2 articles that pretty much confirmed that from independent sources that said, you know, having dry storage for DPW equipment that is expensive is really a prudent move. I mean, and just to amplify, for the record, the garage down on Old Colchester Road is not big enough for all the town's plow trucks. There are trucks that sit outside, and when there's a snow event, the drivers have to go scrape the snow and ice off the trucks that are outside. They have to get them started. They got to wait till they warm up. And there's other equipment that's out there that's exposed to the elements all 4 seasons that really is shortening their lives.
And you'll hear the same thing later on tonight when we get into the fire department, but I'll leave that one as it is right now. Any
Okay.
other questions? Dan? Questions?
No, I believe we're also still storing some of the off-season equipment at the Lions Club.
Lions, yeah, we are.
You know, and you know, they have been a great friend and ally to the town, allowing us to, in fact, you know, utilize their facilities to house some of our, you know, things that we just don't use all the time, but you have to have them in order to do your functions, do your job. You know, it'd be nice to have all of our equipment under our roof. You know, if nothing else, I would think insurance wise would be a plus having it under our roof rather than having it, you know, quote unquote, spread around town. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Fantastic job. Utterly fantastic job.
I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, Mr. Chairman, the
yeah,
last concept was concept 5, which was constructing the garage and the salt shed on John Horton Boulevard, and it's got all of the advantages of public sewer, public water, electricity, and we fully acknowledge the disadvantages, the concern that the residents of Kinney Road and other budding property owners have raised over their concern relative to the salt shed. So, you know, that we all hear when we get loud and clear.
On that, I had asked and in fact received a letter from Ronnie Tanguay, and I probably butchered her name. Short salt storage facility failure. And this, I had done it through Chatham Health looking for input. Let me make sure. Actually, I'll read the whole thing. It says, Andy, in email response, and this is what I requested that the town check. In the email response I received from DEEP below regarding the failure of salt storage facilities. In my own research, I turned up 2 local instances of salt storage resulting in contamination of groundwater. Both of these appear to be the result of older facilities not constructed to modern standards and or not being maintained according to today's best practices. Summary of the 2 instances are between 1984 and 1986, the town of East Hampton and DEP investigated contamination from a mismanaged salt pile, not properly covered, not stored on an impervious surface, poor stormwater runoff management at a private landscaping business, and it listed it as Agway, located at 151 East High Street. That mismanaged salt pile did result in the contamination of a dozen or more private wells in the area. Because this happened nearly 40 years ago, the records are poorly organized, but there is a pretty thick file of test results and letters. It isn't clear to me how the contamination was addressed by the private well owners or the town of East Hampton. So that was an open pile. The next one was up until the 1990s, the state DOT and Marlboro Public Works each shared and continued utilizing an old salt storage facility originally constructed in the 60s, located in the area of 66 South Street or South Main Street. Obviously, this was an older facility, not constructed to modern standards, no coverage, no impervious surface, poor storm water runoff management. The investigation of that failure identified two private drinking water wells, one at 52 South Main Street and another at 3 Wilhinger Drive, that were contaminated as a result. The town of Marlboro purchased the property from the affected homeowners at 3 Wilhinger Drive and is now used as the town food bank. The state purchased the property at 52 South Main, installed a water stripping device used to remove the salt over time, then sold the property at auction as is about 10 years ago. The property was purchased, flipped, and then resold. I believe it is now once again occupied as residential. I hope you find this helpful. If you want to review any of the records associated with either of these two cases, please let me know. We maintain the Agway records here in the main office again. They are extensive but old and poorly organized. Any records associated with the case of Marlboro are kept at the Marlboro Town Hall. And this is from the Chatham Health District. You know, so two
Danny,
instances.
I can add to that. I did same research. When I called Chatham, they referred me to the Department of Health, the drinking water section, as well as DEEP. They have no recorded pollution, salt pollution from any in the state, any salt storage facility that has been built to the current standards and managed to the current standards. They made it very clear that the decision not to manage it, not to have test wells, not to report your findings is not an option. It's punishable under the statutes. It's punishable by a fine under the statutes, and all facilities must maintain that. We keep hearing about the fact that we're going to pollute. It's not if, but when. And the DEEP was very clear to say nothing is ever 100%. But the current record to date is there has been no contamination from salt storage facilities built to the current standards. And we will have that in writing.
Yep. Well, actually, I've got it.
Okay.
From actually, I'm trying to think of exactly the DEEP Water Planning and Enforcement Division's Stormwater Program.
That's them.
Yeah. It also stated that the majority of the complaints received and investigated by the DEEP in relation to salt contamination have been resultant of road applications as opposed to salt storage sheds. And then it also goes in that, you know, as we go forward, we would need to apply for all the different permits, you know, which will include requirements for construction and maintenance of the salt storage facility. I don't know why that's so hard for me to say. These requirements are meant to minimize the potential risks of contamination to the groundwater. And as I say, and that's right from the state. So I just figured I'd read that and have that put into the record. You know, this is current practice, and this is what they're saying. You know, what happened 40 years ago, 60 years ago is in the past and we need to move forward. We just can't keep dredging up what happened XYZ years ago, saying the same thing's going to happen, because there's a whole different environment and a whole different building code requirements on all of these types of structures.
How would you like us to proceed?
I think
If you don't have an answer tonight, that's fine.
Yeah. It's a great, clear, concise report.
Mr.
I
Chairman,
think, yes.
if I might, I had thought it first off, Mal and Richard, this is outstanding work. So thank you. I know that this took a lot of work, and so I do appreciate it. And I think it is important for the public to see it and to hear it and to view it and to see that this is the due diligence we've done. It was my understanding, and someone else, one of my colleagues on the board, correct me if I'm wrong here, that this report would basically form the basis of a survey that we had been talking about creating this committee. We would take this information, formulate the survey to send out to the town of Hebron, and then we could get feedback based on these options. I think that's how I recollect it, but if I'm wrong, someone please clarify.
I'd like to respond to that.
Go ahead.
Hey, Tiffany, even if that isn't what we said, that's a good idea. So I think we've been talking about this for a long time. The public comments are the same comments every week, every meeting. I mean, we got the point that people are concerned about their water. We responded to that. We've offered the fact that we'll put the salt shed somewhere else. So now it's just time to let the people speak. How many times can you keep as a building committee presenting your facts? How many times can those concerns about the public works going on Horton Boulevard keep saying what concerns them? And everybody has a right to say what concerns them is important. But now we're at a standstill. It's like a filibuster. Everybody just keeps talking and we're going nowhere. So I agree with Tiffany. Let's get this thing moving forward to the public and get a survey out there. And you guys have done great work. I don't know. There's no charge we can give you to go back and do anymore. There's nothing else to do. That's how I feel.
At this point, and we do have, we have from, I'll find it here. Dornberg and Kallenbach Advertising. Do we give them this information and let them put it out to the public? If we form another committee, how many months is this going to stretch it out? We got to get this thing resolved one way or another. We've got to get rolling. We've got buildings that at some point in time, our public works employees are going to bring it up through the unions, or we have potential OSHA issues. Something has got to be done. We have, yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we have to move forward and we have to set deadlines and we have to set specific deadlines. The idea that this is some ongoing dialogue that's going to go on forever. I mean, we have to set, if we move, when's the survey going to be done by? Set a date, meet the date. Based on that information, when is it going to referendum? Set a date, meet the date. And we have to challenge ourselves to do that. Like any project in any business, you said the dates and deliverables and we move forward. And so I would ask the building committee, first of all, great work. As always, like Tiffany said, phenomenal. And we're very, as Andy said, very lucky to have you. And I would ask that you consider, as we build this, committee, that you're available to, to serve on that as we put forward this information within the appropriate context to deliver it to the public and support this survey. So I think we'll need to lean on you for that, to make sure that we're presenting the information in a concise and accurate manner. And there are probably questions that will come about to make this, again, more concise and deliverable. in terms of all the research that you've done over such a long period of time. So I would ask that you consider being willing to continue in that capacity in terms of Mal's question of next steps or what you want you to do next. Now, did you have your hand raised? Am I like going off?
I
back
did.
here?
I just simply wanted to say, we'll be more than happy to work with whomever. And I think there are people that have concerns, and I think we need to have one or two of those people too. I don't think we need to form a formal committee. I think we need to get some direction from, if you're going to use a consultant, from a consultant. If not, then we just simply need to get together and start with some questions. Because the last thing we want with this survey is it to be said that it was slanted or it was, not a fair set of questions. And that way we would have people from both sides.
You're right. I mean, we're going to be criticized. You want to minimize the criticism and ultimately have the majority of the public view it as a fair and unbiased delivery of information and questions and soliciting their feedback. Will always be subject to some amount of criticism, but I think it's less likely if we take the step of getting the right support we need to make that happen. If we do it ourselves, I know we've sort of blended right into the next topic, but if we do it ourselves, it's going to be difficult to really fend off any of that criticism. I think if we do it with some support, that would give the public the confidence that we're doing the best that we can to provide information to allow them to make an informed decision, not a biased decision, not that we're putting any pressure one way or the other, but that here's information. We want your feedback. It's time to solicit the broad feedback of the Hebron residency. And it's overdue, frankly. So
what would be the time frame that you want that survey ready to go? Just throwing it out.
Yes, Andy.
Yeah, so it's one of the items on the item AB from the advertising company. They have a list of what they were proposing to do on a price. Another item for you guys to discuss, for them to do it. I'm not sure if that's what the board wants to do, if they want to do it with a firm. That's up to you guys to decide. But that proposal, they would come in and work with you to come up with a time frame, work with whoever committee or whoever the board of selectmen choose to work with that firm to develop the questions. But that all remains to be seen if you guys want to move forward with either using a firm in this proposal, which is on the state bid list, or do something else.
I think, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think in terms of the order here, I think that it would behoove us to, at least as a board, decide if we're going to move forward with this particular firm. And obviously, they've already presented their work and they've been vetted out by the town, and use their expertise to guide us on the next steps relative to the structure, composition of a potential committee, or how we're going to solicit proper input from the town and get fair and unbiased input from all sides. I think we need their guidance. So I would suggest that we, as a board, look at this and decide right now if we're going to move forward with this, and then use their guidance to then discuss potential next steps rather than try to figure all that out tonight.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark.
Dan, I mean, I was flipping my thumb up to say I agree with Peter. If everybody feels like Peter, maybe you were going to say you did, that it's time to move forward and get some help in compiling the survey and see what Tiffany and Gail think about moving forward with that.
Tiffany, Gail?
We need to move forward with something because all we do is keep going back and forth over and over the whole thing. This garage, this public works facility needs to have been built a few years ago. So let's stop spinning our wheels and move. We have to make some decisions.
Tiffany?
And we've got to get to a referendum for the public.
That was going to be my point.
We need
talked
that
about it.
referendum, yes.
Yeah, we've talked about it. We've talked about it. People want to vote. They want to vote on something. That being said, I want to make sure that I'm pretty clear where I stand on the use of taxpayer money to pay for a firm like this. I have no problem supporting using a firm to help us with this survey because I think that it's going to require that amount of work to make sure that the language is neutral. And certainly there are kind of bad feelings on both sides, right? As this dialogue has continued and festered. I do not support retaining a firm to promote the selected site and the selected project as we move forward. So if we're voting on the very narrow scope of working with this firm to do all the survey work, right? Collect all the data, solicit data, report out, present to the public, or at least give us a report that we can share with the public. I'm okay with it for that limited purpose. I just can't support retaining a firm to publicize one project for the town because that's not taking a holistic view of the town's communications needs. So in short, I support working with the firm to develop the survey and to do all of that data analysis and such. But I would need a separate conversation on retaining them further.
And I can go along with the survey, but I can't see spending town money on promoting a particular viewpoint. Once we have that data, it has to go out to the public to vote on. This public works facility is for everybody in town. It's not just a board of selectmen or a public building committee. Everybody has to live with it. It's going to affect everybody's tax dollar. So we need to get it out in a referendum sooner rather than later. It's been put off too long.
Tiffany and Gail, how do we ensure if this company is compiling all the pertinent information, how do we ensure that these questions are neutral and not leading and not skewed? Who would oversee that if we
Hopefully,
do
this
that charge?
firm has been vetted and they will do a very neutral survey.
Andy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if you guys vote tonight to hire this firm, they report back to the Board of Selectmen with their final thing for your approval. That's how that works.
Okay.
So I think the only other thing I'd add, Mark, is that I think it's a really good question. And as a communications professional, I can tell you that's probably one of the most challenging aspects of my job, right? You know, in terms of writing things in a neutral manner. You know, having met with the firm, I have no doubt of their professionalism. But, you know, look, I mean, it's, if we're going to have the final approval, I think, you know, we could rely on the expertise of the five of us to make sure that the questions are neutral. I wouldn't doubt that the firm couldn't. I think the firm can do this, is what I'm trying to say, because, you know, they're trained to do it that way. And if we're going to have the final say regardless, you know, if there are questions that we react to, we can have that conversation before we distribute the survey. I don't know if that helps, but that's my take on it.
Okay. I'm just thinking. So I'm trying to piece together because I don't see.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if all of us believe that we should hire this firm to create the survey, perhaps what you need is a motion to do that?
Well, that's what I'm trying to piece together.
How long do we want this development of the survey to take?
Tiffany, how long does a survey like this usually take? 90 days, 3 months?
Oh, no.
2 months?
I mean, not my experience.
Oh, no.
I hope that
Oh, they've
Not my
outlined,
field.
they've outlined their timeline though already, which is basically to suggest that they would incur this amount of hours to develop the survey. So
Right.
you're talking days.
Days. Yeah.
Really?
easy, Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Put your
Uh,
private hat on. Put your private hat on. This isn't a. This is day. This is days, not months.
I pull
I think
wire.
Andy
I
wants to
move
tell us
generators.
something.
I dig
Are you
ditches.
gonna Are you gonna rain on our parade, Andy?
No,
It's in the packet, underneath the cost estimate. It says, we estimate each of the 3 proposed phases of work will require approximately 1 40-hour week or 40 hours of combined time. Therefore, our total cost estimate for the project is $15,000 for 120 hours at $120 an hour. So there's your time frame, I believe.
Yes, and they said remember we asked them in the last meeting if relative to their scheduling and timing, would we be on a schedule that wouldn't start for 3 months? And they said they could engage with the project like immediately, so or relatively immediately. So we wouldn't have to wait for engagement. We could actually, if we agreed to move forward, it sounds like they could begin work almost
next week.
Yeah, almost like
You
next week.
you would have to, if the board so chooses, which I think I would recommend, you would have to establish who you want to sit on that committee.
Yeah. So is there a motion to hire the firm? There is in the packet. Yes.
I didn't
What
write a
do we
motion,
need a
but
committee
There's no
for
motion.
at this
Oh, okay.
point? If we're hiring them to do the survey, why do we need a committee?
Well, input for them, right? They're not the
formulate the questions.
So I would recommend that we, we have the discussion about the committee, put that on for new business for our next meeting, that maybe Dan, you can propose a motion to hire the firm based on the proposed outline, if that's what you choose to do, and move the question forward in the form of a motion. We need to keep this moving.
Right. That, as I
God,
say, so
yeah.
that was what I was trying to do. Make a motion that we hire the firm of, Doran Blaine,
DKA.
DKA. Thank you. For the initial purpose of putting together a non-biased survey to get public input as for the disposition of a new public works facility.
In the amount of, do you want to add the figure there, their proposed, or do you not want to put that, or per the proposed contract, some reference to that, Dan, maybe? If I could make a friendly suggestion or friendly.
Yeah,
amendment.
no, and what I'm trying to figure out is that was for more than what we are looking for at this time, or
No, I don't think so.
No, I think
so we
that's in
can
scope.
stay with that number?
But Mr. Chair, if I could just make a friendly
please.
recommendation, is that you authorize myself as the town manager on the town's behalf to enter into a contract with DAK as specified in the proposal. I think that covers it. And then we could bring them to the next meeting, whatever. You guys could talk to them yourselves.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I get the point of that. If we get rid of number 3, we took a week off of this, so it would be 10 grand. Do we really need to have a public information meeting?
It
We're
says
just
it's
doing the
desirable, right? So that looks like they're leaving that up to us to decide, right? It says if desirable, maybe. So Mark, it's probably something that when we talk to them about the particulars, we can decide, okay, let's take that out. Now the scope of the project is lessened and the cost is less, and we don't move with 3. But they have, I see here, if desirable. So they're sort of saying, hey, let's, it's there in the scope of work, but we don't necessarily have to move forward with it, and that would reduce the cost and the time.
So is that you would say that that's in the estimate? And seeing how there's 3 phases, I'm thinking each one's probably basically a week at 40 hours each. So we approve 15, but maybe we spend less. Is that
Correct.
kind of
It
what you're
says
saying, Pete?
3 phases, and that is the 3rd phase, Mark. So you're right, and that's the 3rd phase, and it said if desirable. So you're exactly right. This could actually be less than scope, time, and money, but at least it allows us to have that dialogue with them as it moves forward. If we start to see it evolve, we're not outside of the scope of the original anticipated costs.
All right,
Okay.
thanks.
Because I was that was what in the back of my mind. I wasn't sure how to put it into words, Mark. That was what I
figured
was saying.
I thought that's where you were going.
Yeah, it was.
So I think Andy's got it right in terms of what, the motion is specific to the scope of the project as outlined, which does give us that leeway.
Okay.
On that third phase, which addresses, Mark, your point. And then we can start discussing the particulars once we're agreeing to move forward.
I would, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
I know this is a shame on me for not having a motion, but if you guys want to modify this contract, I wouldn't approve having me enter into a contract with those numbers in it. We should renegotiate. So maybe table this till the next meeting.
I would be happier to do that and have them say, okay, it would be X amount of dollars for this phase, X amount for this phase, and X amount for this phase type thing.
But haven't they outlined that though? I mean, the contract, the document that's in the packet seems to outline that already.
It just has a specific amount. I just would worry about that.
I thought it was by hour, so we think each phase is
Well,
40 hours.
120 hours at 125 an hour.
I don't see why we would wait on the motion to at least move forward with something. We're losing time.
Yeah.
So I read the proposal. It seemed pretty clear to me. The proposal seemed limited in scope to the survey, which is what I'm requesting in terms of, I'm not interested in spending more money to promote whatever site we select. So I don't see any reason why we can't move forward. That's my opinion. If I'm outvoted, that's fine.
No, I agree. And I think if you look at under the proposed cost estimate, what's up on the screen now, the paragraph, the sentence, we estimate that each of the 3 proposed phases of work will require approximately 1 week of combined time. Therefore, our total cost estimate for this project is $15,000. And then you go back up to the third phase and it says, if desirable. So the contract does seem to give us the latitude to move, with just phase 1 and phase 2, if we choose, or phase 3 is optional. That's how I read it. So I agree with Tiffany. I think we have enough information to move forward. I don't suggest we wait any longer.
Okay.
I agree. I want to move forward from here.
Yep. Okay. Hearing Andy's proposed motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Tiffany?
Tiffany Teely, aye.
Peter?
Peter Casper, aye.
Gail?
Gail Richmond, aye.
Mark?
Mark Rivera, aye.
And myself, aye. Thank you. Okay.
So doesn't get easier. So now we go to, now because we're where we are in the budgetary process of the town, we're proposing a budget for next year. So this one might get deferred due to that last vote, but the third one is if the selectmen decide to move forward with the final design and engineering proposal for the project, the town manager is recommending funding through the 2023-2024 CIP budget. That money that is being alluded to is for BL Companies and Nathan L. Jacobson to do the final design. But that is at the Johnny Horton Keeney Road property. As I'm putting that budget together now, I think Tiffany had raised up where would we fund that if we needed to fund that. So I put it in the budget in the CIP item for you guys to consider.
Is it not true that we can put it in the CIP budget, but that at a later date, change and take it back out prior to the vote?
Good point.
There's a time frame, Donna might know on the top of her head when you have to approve the CIP budget to move it forward to a vote, but yeah, you have some time.
So what I'm saying is if we approve our CIP budget as presented, moving it forward, if towards the end we decide that we want to nix that for whatever reason, we can do that. We don't have to spend that money. It'd be like buying a truck that all of a sudden is determined that, you know what, we don't want to buy that truck this year. We're going to hold it off.
Yeah, Donna, how does that work if they approve it tonight the items to move forward to the budget, can they remove something prior to referendum? I'm pretty sure they can, but
I believe so. I think, tonight is the initial look at the CIP, and then later in the month, they'll approve or they'll recommend the CIP. But during the March budget review meetings, the selectmen will be able to adjust that CIP budget
Okay,
before it
so-
goes to vote. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think you were getting to the point is it's premature to approve doing that because we don't even know where the site's going to be. So we're kind of approving the money for a site that's unknown yet, and we don't want to spend money on a specific site that we don't even know we're going to build yet. So that's why you're requesting that we be able to take this out in lieu of finding the results of the survey. Is that how I understand? What you're trying to
Basically,
get?
I'm saying, let's keep it in for now, but we have that option if things change down the road, that we can change that CIP item.
That
Prior
sounds
to vote.
reasonable to me. As long as we could do it, that's reasonable.
Because this way, at least we've got the funds, and we don't have to start scrambling.
Yeah, okay.
Peter?
Yeah, we need a placeholder for the funds anyway, right? Regardless of where we go.
That's all we're trying to do.
We need the funds. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. We need funds for that at some point because we're going to do the survey. We're going to go to referendum. We're going to get clear direction. We're going to get approval, and then we're going to move forward. Right? Thumbs up for those that are
That's what
listening.
we're hoping. Yes.
And at some point, then that is the next step. Where within that process, those monies will need to be spent on whatever the public asks us to move forward on. We will have to develop the site, and I'll do all that due diligence. As long as a placeholder, we're going to need to spend the money anyway. I don't even see taking it out. I just see maybe it's less definitive to a specific location and more for the project that we anticipate is going to be going forward within the next fiscal year.
Well said.
Okay.
So you don't have to vote on it on this item. It's going to CIP approvals coming up on item 9E.
Okay. Beautiful. So I think we're set on that.
I think now we go back to the American Rescue Plan, state and local recovery funds approval.
That's what I was trying to figure out. Was there anything else with the building committee? Or I think we're set.
We just have the agreement with to move forward with the design for the firehouse, but that's part of your ARPA discussion, I believe. Andy.
Yes, it's next on this one. Thank you, Mel.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the building committee is obviously on, and I'm happy to talk about the one item because they're here. I'm not interested in talking about the others. It's 10 o'clock.
I agree.
Okay.
So
I
they're
agree.
here, and out of respect for them, let's talk about this item, and everything else, please, I would recommend we table.
Agreed.
Peter, you beat me to it. I was going to say, I think we need to table everything else. We've been at it for 3 hours.
Let's
Yeah.
finish what they're here. So out of respect for them, let's talk about this item and move this one way or the other. Let's move through this item. Thank you.
Okay, let me just.
I would just ask, Andy, is that paramedic, that contract, does that need to be done? Is that time sensitive?
If you guys could hang and just do that one other item, that would help. But if you can't, we'll put it on the next agenda. I'd rather try to do that tonight if you can.
The paramedic.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if we could do, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Chief Starkell, if we could do that contract tonight, that's extremely time sensitive. I would greatly appreciate that.
Yep. I agree.
Thank you.
And then the only other thing, I know there was one ARPA thing that is somewhat time sensitive, and that was the fence between the Legion and the library. Did we want to talk about that at all, or do we want to table that? The only thing was a Maple Fest.
We can table that because that still needs historic properties approval.
Okay. Okay. So then we're going to go into the
Engineering and design for
yes.
company one. So I'll start quickly, and I promise quickly, then I'll turn it over to the building committee. But you guys approved the expansion of the ambulance bay at the Company One Fire Station previously in the ARPA funds. And then you also gave a leeway of 20% to the town manager for projects. But what happened is when we had this looked at with the building official, and like I said, I'm not going to steal the building committee's thunder. They came back with some additional expenses that wasn't in the $100,000 that was approved. So I feel it was more than appropriate to come back to the Board of Selectmen and get their take on this additional funding. And I'll let the building committee explain why.
You currently have in front of you a proposal from Tecton for design and engineering costs for this addition to Company One. We met with Chief Starkel. We met with the building official a couple months ago, and if you recall, the east side of that east side parking lot and the wall on the east side of that building had some issues with it wasn't really attached to much. We did address some of the issues, but the building official has requested that we do test borings, and that's about $8,000. Also, the way the building is constructed, they can't just slap on an extension without looking at the ratings of the structure that's in there, the steel structure that's in there, how and where it's supported. So that requires some engineering. There also, Dan, you had brought up the issue of the heat distribution.
Yes.
And Peter went through it with the representative, and they're going to also take a look at that and at least tell us what their suggestion is. But you've got a proposal in front of you for $28,100, something like that.
Yeah.
And that would be for all the design, all the engineering, for the borings, for the construction drawings, for the contract administration, and for the on-site inspection from this firm. It's a lot of money, but it's a small project. Generally, soft costs run about 15% of the project. This is a little bit more than 15%. However, if you just look at their design costs, I think it's $14,000. That is about 15%. But then you add on the other things, and it goes up a little bit. When we met with Chief Starkel, we asked him when he needed it, and he said yesterday. And Peter, we're going to let you explain why it has to be built. And so, in discussion with the representative that we're dealing with Jeff, who by the way also lives in Hebron, he said that they could be ready to get this project bid and out and hopefully done this summer. So, Richard or Peter, if you have anything to add, please do.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that. I think we've discussed the importance of this a few times as far as being able to have both our ambulances in headquarters as well as our other specialty apparatus. So this small expansion would allow us to accomplish those goals. So.
All right, let's vote on it.
Okay. Is there a motion for this individually? If not, I'll make a motion that we approve the cost of services as listed by Tectron. Okay. Okay.
Can you see it?
Yeah, it's just that we're doing the one thing at this point.
I understand.
So again, make a motion that we approve the engineering design of Company One Ambulance Bay Extension, the additional funding to come out of ARPA funds to Tectron Industries or whatever the company name is for the amount of $28,100. I think that should do it.
Okay.
Anybody? Do I need to add anything, Peter? Anybody? Pretty cut, pretty basic.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Maybe authorize Andy to sign.
And authorize Andrew J. Tierney to sign any and all related documents for that project. Tiffany,
Tiffany Teely, aye.
Peter,
Peter Casper, aye.
Gail,
Gail Richmond, aye.
Mark,
Mark Rivera, aye.
myself, I. Okay,
Thank you very much.
Peter, I guess that's it with the building committee, correct?
Yes. I
Okay.
believe we're jumping to 9C, if I heard correctly.
Yep.
Thank you, Mal. Thank you, Richard, very much.
Yes. Incredible job as always. Incredible. Tremendous amount of work. We are just so fortunate to have so many dedicated, knowledgeable professionals to help us with these projects. So thank you. Okay. Attached is a renewal for the purchasing agreement between the town of Hebron Fire Department and the Wyndham Hospital for paramedic services. Chief Starkell and the town manager are recommending approval. I'll read the motion and then we can open it up for discussion. Move to the Hebron Board of Selectmen approve the purchasing agreement between the town of Hebron Fire Department and Wyndham Hospital for the paramedic services. Authorize Andrew J. Tierney, town manager, to sign the agreement. Okay. Do we open it up to either Andy or Pete? Chief?
I'll defer to Peter. I think it's good.
So yeah, we annually renew this contract. This contract proposal, we're actually going to be moving to a multi-year contract, which will make things a little bit easier for us. There's some very modest increases in reimbursement to the paramedics for depending on the type of transport that range from $5 to $10 that we're increasing their payments. The contract also includes a change. There's a per capita paramedic service fee that was instituted in 1995 at $1 per capita. And so this contract's proposing that as of July 1, that per capita would go to $1.25. And then July 1 of 24, that would go to $1.50. And again, that portion of the contract, that fee or that fee that we pay to the hospital for the program hasn't changed since the program inception in 1995.
Yeah, that's actually about a little over, I just figured it out, like $2,200 a year,
Yep.
2,300, something like that.
I rounded to 23, about 2,300.
Yep. I got a calculator right beside me.
Perfect.
Yeah. The only other thing I would add is I was reading, and I guess the state is actually looking at possibly doing some different possible adjustments with the Medicare and some of the Medicaid billing. I'm not sure how that's going to affect any of that. It's what our EMS staff or our ambulance billing company can bill the patients.
Yeah, there's some proposed language at the state level to actually Medicaid for transport pays about $200, and they're trying to get Medicaid to pay comparable to Medicare, which Medicare we can bill up to almost $800. So it would definitely be a benefit for us if the state pushed that. So
yeah. Anybody have any questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Tiffany?
Tiffany Teely, aye.
Peter,
Peter Casper, aye.
Gail,
Gail Richmond, aye.
Mark,
Mark Rivera, aye.
and myself, I. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. And just to follow up to Tiffany's question earlier about the impending weather, we're actually going to be staffing the station tomorrow evening with an ambulance crew overnight, just so we make sure we get an ambulance out, and in case people have dead batteries at home and can't respond with the extreme cold weather. So we're prepared, and we'll have people in quarters ready to go.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
While you're on, I just wanted to thank you and your crew. And I already mentioned Andy and Donna for Christmas Eve. And because I didn't want to not mention names, both the town hall was open Christmas Eve because of the power outages in town, and the fire department was open with, again, people standing by in the event of, and also I believe this library. And I actually went to the library, and nobody was there when I was there, but both the fire department and town hall were staffed. I actually drove around. So thank you for doing that for the town.
Absolutely. Our pleasure.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, I think you got public comment.
Well, yeah.
Yep. Well, do we want to do the consent agenda items
No,
or
sir.
not? Was that?
No,
Put it off?
I think
Okay.
everything needs to be put off. It's already 10:06.
Okay. Well, then I
And I
guess
think
we'll.
some of my colleagues agree with me.
We do. We do.
Yeah, I'm a fan of time limits.
Are we going into
Yeah.
executive? I'm sorry. Are we going into executive session tonight or no?
No, I think we should put that off too, Tiffany.
Okay, I just wanted to ask.
Partner.
Me too.
Okay, so then at that point, we will move right to item 12, public comment. I know we have one. And again, name please in 3 minutes or less.
So Kevin Tulamari is first.
Yes, and I'll be very brief. Thank you for your efforts tonight. And I'm also glad to be moving forward. And I would like to offer to serve on the committee. And I'd just kind of like to make clear I'm not unreasonable, but I am passionate. You can't live without water, but our history is irreplaceable once it's lost. So those are a couple of my passions, but I do try to be a reasonable person. Couple brief clarifications for the record. It's not really the salt shed that is the source of contamination that we're concerned about. It's the intense truck traffic that would surround the public works activities, the stormwater treatment pond, and the underlying fractured bedrock. Those are concerns that don't necessarily emanate from the salt shed itself. And then the chairman stated that the entire town of Hebron is GA water, and that again is not accurate. The current public works site is classified as GA, GAA may not meet current standards. And maybe it would be helpful for us all if we had a current groundwater test so we knew what we were talking with. And Mr. Casper, I appreciate your comments on the fair and unbiased survey that I think we all look forward and hope to have. I think a step in the right direction would to possibly have the town add to its current public works information on the website, the new historical information that's in your agenda tonight. I would say go ahead and have that checked out with the Hebron Historical Society or the Historic Properties Commissions. I'm confident you will find all that information is accurate. Another good step would be to add Mr. Warziko's letters to the public works information on the town website. He is a highly respected long-term specialist and a former deep supervisor. Thank you for those considerations.
Thank you. Mel, I guess, is he next? Mel? Mel Lecter?
Yeah, okay, here I am. I just, again, for the record, the chairman was corrected on the GAA property. I don't think we need to keep reliving this. And if Mr. Warzika's letters are put into the record, I'm sure he's a highly competent person, but by his own admission, he has never examined a site that was causing pollution from the currently built standards. And it's about time that the people in Hebron get the whole story. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else for public comment? Hearing none. Thank you all very, very much. Have a safe, warm weekend as best as possible. Again, if you know of anybody that needs warming help or whatever, get a hold of the town entities. Sometimes check in on the elderly. Many times they try to save, heat by turning down the thermostats. So I ask if we all just kind of check our neighbors, especially those who may be financially challenged. So thank you very much.
Wait, Gail.
And I'll make the motion that we adjourn at 10 p.m.
Thank you.
Everybody's
Good
in
night,
favor,
everybody.
right?
Right.